The other thing is this topic's so broad, I'm not going to get to say everything I want. It's just not going to happen. His chat's doing research on me. That's fun. All right, here we go.
All right, guys, are you ready for a debate? We're expecting full contact on this one. Everyone will adhere to TOS, of course. However, while the debaters have agreed to a very concise set of rules, which is essentially that they're going to stay on topic, they both know what the topic are. And this is just going to be a hell of a debate. I've really been looking forward to it. I'm going to bring out our debaters and introduce them both. First, I'm going to start with Rob Noerr. Rob, how you doing?
Doing great. Glad to be here. I don't think I'll be able to live up to that intro. Damn, that's epic. But I'm glad to be here. You did some work on that, man. It's great.
Yeah, the Dylan Dice. Let me give him a shout out. He does all the music for the Crucible, and man, he does a wonderful job. Hunter Avallone, how are you tonight? It's good to see you back on the Crucible. This is Rob's first time. How's everything going in your world? You're muted, man.
Sorry about that. What's up? Good to see you, Rob. Thanks for having me on again.
Nice to meet you,
Andrew.
This is going to be this debate. You will be able to open. You can have between 5 and 7 minutes. You don't have to use all of it if you don't want to. You can use as much of it as you want to. After the introductions are done, we're going to open up the floor. As Rob was the challenger, we're going to let Rob go first with his opening statement. Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, so there's a lot of issues that come with vaccines and the mandates. I think that we're going to be approaching both of those. My big concern is the mandate. So let me first say this. I'm not someone that would consider myself an anti-vaxxer. And in fact, some people on the right might not even like my position on this. My position is I don't have any proof that this vaccine is intentionally out to hurt people or anything like that. In fact, my opinion is there are a lot of people that the vaccine makes sense for, particularly if you're over 75. If you have a lot of comorbidities, if you have respiratory illnesses and stuff like that. I can't prove it. I'm not a medical expert, but based on my individual reading of the data, I think that the potential risks from the vaccine would be outweighed by the potential risks from getting COVID if you're in certain segments of the society. The question becomes people that are not in those sectors. For example, younger people or people that have natural immunity or children. And there's a lot of questions as to whether or not the vaccine would be beneficial for those people. There are also questions about potential side effects from the vaccine, particularly long-term, and other things like that. Having said that, I don't think that you should listen to me, and I'm sure Hunter, I hope, will agree with me. You probably shouldn't listen to him. Find a medical professional you trust and have consultations with them about your specific situation. If you're coming to a fat guy that has trouble breathing when he's walking up the stairs for medical advice, you're probably making the wrong decision here. So I'm not recommending anything. I'm just giving my honest points on the efficacy of whether or not the vaccine works and things like that. However, that's not where the real heart of this debate lies, as far as I'm concerned. For me, the entire COVID situation has been about control the entire time. I was making videos in March of 2020, even when Donald Trump was out there saying that the governors that were doing a good job were governors like Newsom and Cuomo, and that we needed to have lockdowns, and places like Georgia and Sweden were making mistakes by not locking down. I was talking about how we have to look at what the potentials from the dangers to our country from COVID would be. The first danger would be the people that actually die or get significantly ill from COVID. I admitted I didn't know this could be anywhere from 1,000 to 10 million people that died. And as tragic as any death is, particularly once you get into those higher numbers, our country would survive. The second thing that could harm our country is things that would harm our country that were mitigating measures that we took against COVID. And that would be like locking down the society, taking away our rights and things like that. I predicted that that would lead to a fallout that would last far longer than COVID, and that it would be worse than the actual people that died from the amount of COVID. And I think that that's bearing out, where you could see inflation, supply shortages, things like that, and the loss of our freedoms and liberties, and more intrusions into our rights than we've seen in a long time in this country, including and up to telling people that they can't see their family, they can't go to work, they can't go to church, but you could go to the liquor store, you could go to the casino, you could go march for Black Lives Matter, you could go riot. All of those things have given us a decreased in credibility of our medical profession. But the third thing that I talked about was, if we are willing to give up our rights and completely lock down our economy and things like that based on fear-mongering from the government on an unknown, it would be the beginning of the end of our country as we know it, because that fear-mongering would be used ad infinitum over and over. We could see just today, there are people talking about how, well, if you think COVID's bad, wait until you see climate change, and we need to do a bunch of lockdowns and things like that in regard to that. We need to stand up for our rights. This is about control. We've seen people from the Telegraph that admitted that doctors and scientists that were involved in fear-mongering with the government coming out saying what we did was absurd, what we did was immoral, and it was used to push a bunch of crap. We could see Justin Trudeau and even Joe Biden come out in the form of his press secretary admit that this is their opportunity to get a bunch of stuff passed that they wanted anyways. It's about control. That's what this entire thing's about. Up to and including demonizing other potential things other than the vaccine. They demonize monoclonals. They demonize things like hydrochloroquine and ivermectin before they knew whether or not they would be successful. I'm not saying that those drugs are successful, but you could see the giddiness in so many people in the establishment, and particularly in people on the left, that want those treatments to fail because they want the ability to constantly control. They're now saying that you're going to have to take booster shots every so many months. They're saying that we have to punish children by forcing them to be locked down, by forcing them to be masked, or by forcing them to take vaccines, such as in California. And yet the teachers that every scientific study shows are more likely to contract, spread, and die from COVID, they're not forced to have the mandate. People are left out of vaccine mandates, such as people that work in Congress, people that work in certain agencies like teachers unions and things like that. This is all political. And the efforts to censor and silence people from social media and governmental groups on the data and on questions of COVID is a tyranny that is worth fighting against. The mandates are unacceptable. They're about control, and they don't apply logical consistency. We can see that natural immunity, study after study shows, is equal to or superior to the vaccination status. And yet, despite that, people with natural immunity are treated as if they have no antibodies whatsoever, even though their antibodies are superior to those that have the vaccine. So what I would like to get out of this debate is to talk about that tyranny, and to also get Hunter's position as to what he thinks our moral obligation and ideology is, into how far each of us should legally have to go or morally should have to go into preventing and trading our freedom for security. If we don't stop trading our freedom for security, if we allow the government to take away our rights every time there's an emergency, then the government will find excuses to create emergencies to continue to take away our rights. That's it.
Hunter, your opening, please.
Yeah, I don't really have like much of an opening, to be fair. When it comes to the claim that this is about control, you would just have to make a more compelling claim, like a more compelling argument to me. Like, for example, if we want to talk about this push for control thing, I mean, all of the measures that have been taken in order to enact vaccine mandates, the court precedent is there. They have the legal rights to do so. No control has been expanded. No power has been gained. Rather, we just see state and federal governments primarily using the power they already have. So right off the bat, I'm willing to just jump into the open dialogue if we can start, because I have a question for Rob, which is, how can you claim that this is tyranny when we're talking about like vaccination mandates, for example? Like, the Constitution gives the states the right to mandate vaccines. So it sounds like, to me, it sounds like you're the one that's trying to trample on the Constitution and kind of step away and step on other people's rights when the state has a right to mandate vaccines.
Can you show me where in the Constitution it says it?
Sure, it's called the 10th Amendment. It gives the state the right to basically, it gives them the ability to do things that the federal government cannot, which includes vaccination mandates.
Cool. So
They're
then
able to
the
use
mandate
those
the mandate that we're discussing was an executive order or proposed executive order by the federal government in
No,
the form of
the-
Joe Biden.
the-
Yes, it was. For example,
No,
let
there
me
was-
ask you real quick.
So there was,
Let me ask
hold
you
on,
real quick.
There was the no, because there was the Joe Biden OSHA thing. That was not an executive order. This is currently going through the proper process with OSHA, which again, there's legal precedent there also. This is not an expansion of any rights. No control has been gained. Like, this is literally states abiding by the Constitution. The federal government using OSHA. I mean, OSHA's been around since the 70s. It was created by a Republican, and it involves protecting workplace safety. This extends to vaccines.
Okay, so
this is not tyranny.
First off, the 10th Amendment that says that anything not specifically outlined in the Constitution is the right of the states. That is not the same as saying the states have the right to mandate vaccines and things like that. But secondly,
but it's already been ruled before.
But secondly,
Courts disagree with you, my friend.
let's just take
Courts
a specific.
have ruled against
please, let's just take a specific example. Then, right now we have Joe Biden's executive order that's being proposed as a mandate, but we have the governor of Texas, Greg
Not an
Abbott,
executive order.
the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, that's saying that he is outlawing vaccine mandates. Do you think, given that you've given the rationale for mandates as the 10th Amendment, that the federal government has no right to have any sort of mandate in Texas because it's a state rights issue?
No. So again, this would go back to OSHA. So the federal government does have some regulatory power when it comes to the private sector. And this is with OSHA. OSHA goes through the process and OSHA regulates workplace safety. This extends to making sure that your employees are not getting a preventable disease. This is involves the federal government, yes, being allowed to mandate private businesses enforce vaccines on a certain standard. I can read you an actual thing if you want.
The question, but again, you can see that you've contradicted yourself massively already. So your opening statement said,
how have I contradicted myself?
Hang on, Rob. Let him read what he has to read.
Well,
Okay,
no, go ahead. I want to know how I've contradicted myself.
Sure. When I asked what the rationale was, in fact, unprompted, you in your opening statement said that this wasn't tyranny because the 10th Amendment. That was the reason you gave, because of the 10th Amendment.
That was one of the reasons.
Right, but that's the first reason you give. The 10th Amendment specifically says if it's not specifically outlined in the Constitution, that's the right of the states. So if it's a states' rights issue and the state of Texas says we're not going to allow any vaccine mandates here, where does the Constitution say that the federal government has the right to override that?
It's not an overriding anything.
Sure
so the Texas thing, we're going to have to see how that plays out. But again, just if the 10th Amendment, hold on, do you think that this means the federal government can't do anything then? Because the 10th Amendment, no, that's not how this works. So I talked about the 10th Amendment in the broader context of the fact that there is large legal precedent here. This goes back to your main claim, which is that this is somehow about control, which is frankly ridiculous. So for example, there's over 200 years of court precedent when it comes to states' rights to mandate vaccines. And then I brought up the 10th Amendment there because states also have a right to mandate vaccines. However, the federal government also can make some workplace safety regulations. Granted, they could never do a federal vaccine mandate across like the board. Like if you're an American citizen, you must be vaccinated. The federal government couldn't do that. That would be an overstepping of government rights. But when we're talking about actual OSHA, this is going through the legal process. It's playing out. Now, I will say that this could be argued that it's might be like a legal gray area. But again, there's already precedent there with other things that OSHA has done. So
there's
this is
nothing.
not tyranny.
This is clearly a further encroachment than anything OSHA has ever done. They have never mandated vaccines in the name of workplace safety before. They've never punished employers for the medical decisions of their employees. That's never happened. And I'm just pointing out. We'll move on to a different subject, but it's quite clear to anyone listening.
We don't need to move on to the next subject.
I let you speak unfettered. It's quite evident to anyone that's listening that you gave the rationales of the 10th Amendment, and now the 10th Amendment, which specifically says that the states, if it's not specifically outlined in the Constitution, that they're the ones who get to make these decisions, and yet immediately you're saying, oh, but Texas doesn't get the right to say that they don't abide by.
I didn't say Texas. Hold on, whoa. Now I'm going to cut you off because you're completely and frankly putting words in my mouth right here. I never said that Texas doesn't have the right to do it. Texas arguably does actually have their own state rights to restrict it, although keep in mind that that's breaking away from precedent. So there's actually a much stronger argument that it is the anti-vaxxers and the people fighting against these mandates that are actually making more efforts to control. Literally, you had the Texas governor saying first, well, no, we don't need to invade private businesses. And now all of a sudden they're saying, no, you're not allowed to mandate vaccines. This also goes back to another broader question, which is, are you against COVID vaccines or are you against all vaccine mandates? Like, are you against like public school mandating vaccines? Because that, for example, is a very common thing.
Okay, so I'll answer the question, but first I want to say this. We can see that this is a massive expanse of control. One of the things that people that want this...
is not, no. Yes, I'm going to have to keep on cutting you off.
Please,
this is not
you're not going to keep cutting me off. I understand you need to do so because
Rob,
you're going to lose the debate.
Hang on, Hunter. You do have to let Rob respond.
You're right. It's just everything he says is wrong.
Right. Sure. We'll see how that plays out. But we could see that this is a massive expansion of power and tyranny, and you could see that the way people want to excuse it. Well, similar things have been done in the past. Nothing has been done like this in the past. It's not similar to states saying that if you're going to attend public school, you have to have certain vaccines. This is completely different than that. We're literally, I'll explain. One, because it's using OSHA as a mechanism to punish employers for medical decisions that employees didn't make. Second, it's based on a vaccine that's completely new. The former vaccine mandates that were done at the state level were vaccines that had years of data behind them and were for illnesses that had far higher case fatality rates and things like that. And third, we could see that it's different because we could see that there are individual states that are ruling against these mandates and are going against the wishes of the federal government. And we could see that the way that this has been applied, not just in the vaccine mandate, but in the restrictions and the tyranny that's gone on. Show me a time in the past, recent past, when we've actually told people you can't go to church, but you can go to the liquor store. You can't go.
Again,
real quick.
You want to go down to this?
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to have you do that. But you can't go to. You can't go to school, even though that was.
You're pivoting to a different topic. No.
It's not a different topic. It's the crux of this argument was you saying that this isn't about control and tyranny, and that's exactly what it's about.
It's not. So OSHA already can punish employers for failing to enforce workplace safety standards. Legal experts have literally argued that this extends to vaccinations. Show me when it's happened before then. Claim, whereas, do you need me to break down the 10th Amendment thing for you? Do you need me to help you understand? So
you've lost that debate. That debate's done.
The 10th Amendment gives, buddy, the 10th Amendment.
What does OSHA have to do with states' rights? It's an executive agency.
This is what I'm explaining is OSHA also has some rights given to it here, okay?
By the 10th Amendment.
No, I'm not. Okay, you need me to break this down. The 10th Amendment is not what gives OSHA any rights here.
Cool, then why are you talking about it when we're talking about OSHA and you're saying that there's historical precedent for it?
Because it's
a simple question. Show me the historical precedent of OSHA doing this.
Because I'm trying to
we're talking past each other, guys.
We really are. The 10th Amendment was...
Let's start with... Go ahead, Hunter. You can make your case with the 10th Amendment and OSHA again, and then we'll let Rob respond.
Okay, so the 10th Amendment and OSHA are two different things. They're not particularly related. But when you talk about and make the claim that this is about control, I'm pushing back on that by saying this is not about control. There's not been a massive expansion of anything. When we're talking about the 10th Amendment, this gives the states the right to mandate vaccines. So if states want to enact vaccine mandates, they can. And also, as a side note, to address your quarantine thing, they can also mandate lockdowns and whatnot also. The Supreme Court has ruled this once in 1824 and also in 1902. So they also have the right to do that. So my claim there is that on a state level, there's not an expansion of power. So it doesn't make sense that this is about control. And next, as a separate point, the OSHA thing, okay, also means that the federal government also has, although not as much as the states, a broader power in order to regulate workplace safety through OSHA. Now, again, this has to play out through the legal channels. You keep saying it was an executive order. It's not. Before this debate, I was just reading about how it's being reviewed. It's going through the process. There are literally laws that allow for the ETS, the expedited way that they're using this. All of this is here. This is not an expansion of power. So that's where I'm pushing back about it being controlled. So just to be clear, the 10th Amendment and OSHA, these are two separate things.
Right. So stop conflating. We've already dealt with the 10th Amendment. So you've said that these sort of things have been done before, but there's two ways to push back on that. One, I'll ask you again, show me an example of OSHA doing this in the past.
Well, there hasn't been an example of OSHA doing this exact thing in the past.
Show me
but
them
what
doing
I'm saying
something
is that
similar.
OSHA. Sure. So in June, they enacted different workplace safety guidelines in order to keep people, I think, social distancing and wearing masks.
So just COVID related. So you can't show me an example before COVID.
Well, I could try to find one for you. I mean, it's existed since the 1970s.
Okay.
OSHA primarily exists to make sure that the employees are kept safe in their work environment. So that makes sure that you are aware of the...
So, for example, let's just ask you this. Let's say that at the onset of the HIV and AIDS pandemic in the mid-'80s, let's say that will you agree with this? There were a lot of people that had serious questions about how HIV spread. Some thought it was through aerosol and things like that, correct?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not too familiar.
So if OSHA would have punished employers that said you have to test all of your employees for HIV, and anyone that's HIV positive has to take specific health measures, such as specific treatments and things like that, medical treatments, you would have said that's fine. OSHA has the right to do that.
No, so I would push back against that right away. So the law actually recognizes the difference between a vaccine and a medical procedure. So there would actually be some pushback if they said you need to undergo some kind of surgery, you need to undergo an actual medical procedure. Vaccines do not extend there.
I'm not talking about surgery.
I don't know how I would go with. I don't know what I would say to some hypothetical thing that happened in the 80s with HIV. I'm not too concerned about it. Again, your claim is that this is about control.
It is.
And you're saying this is about control when I'm telling you that the legal precedent exists for the state government and federal government to mandate these vaccines.
So he just said that the law...
It would be an overstep. It would be an overstepping, just to be clear, of the federal government's rights in order to, if they came out and said, any American citizen, you must get vaccinated.
Okay.
If they said that would be a violation.
What he just said, specifically to the context of OSHA, we were talking about OSHA and potential HIV things. I was talking about them forcing medications and stuff. He said that the law is very specific, talking in the context of OSHA, saying that vaccines, that's legal, but not these other things like medical procedures. Can you point to me the law that says that OSHA has the right to issue vaccines to people, but not other medical procedures?
I didn't say that OSHA did that. I said that generally the law recognizes a difference between workers and employees' ability to employers' ability to mandate vaccines versus mandating some kind of actual medical procedure. If you want to go look it up, you can.
Sure, I'll look it up.
This seems to be kind of the move with a lot of the anti-vax debates I have, which is just you guys start asking 20 questions, and then if I don't have the one answer off the top of my head, you're like, aha, see, major contradiction.
Let me tell you what's going on. I specifically talked about how this was tyranny and this type of control, particularly in the mechanisms that they're using, such as OSHA punishing employers for their employees not taking medical procedures that they wanted. It's unprecedented.
They've done before.
It's not unprecedented. Real quick. So I'm not asking a gotcha question. You're saying, no, that's not true. OSHA's done that before. I'm saying, cool. I've looked for that and haven't seen it. Can you provide me an example?
I'm saying, no. So what I was responding to is that OSHA has absolutely punished employers for not regulating workplace safety.
Right. That has nothing to do with vaccines.
No, it does. That's where we're disagreeing here. Is workplace safety absolutely does. This is what this is what the legal experts have argued. But again, we're going to have to see this play out in court. There might be, something that I'm missing here. Maybe it's not right. Maybe the court will strike it down. But again, this isn't an executive order. We're going through the legal channels. This isn't an expansion of government power. Now, if Biden came out and said, I'm creating a new agency that allows me to mandate that, then maybe, yeah, okay, something. But OSHA exists. It's existed for decades. It exists to protect workplace safety, and that also extends to vaccines. Now, if you don't like that, that's fine. But at the end of the day, this doesn't support your claim that this is tyranny or something of that matter, when in reality this is just using legal channels that already exist.
Okay,
Secondly,
let's focus in on this, right? So again, the reason you're saying that's not tyrannical is because this has been done before, but you can't give an example of when OSHA's done this before.
No, I'm
real quick.
I'm not saying
please. I let you talk. So
yeah, you gotta let them respond.
You're right. I have cut off a lot. I'm sorry.
So this is the mechanism through which you're using it. You're saying, well, there are things, for example, we accepted OSHA, and we've accepted that OSHA is allowed to mandate worker safety. We've accepted that they could punish employers. And we've accepted that states could do certain things when it comes to saying if you're going to go to public school that you have to have a certain vaccine that's been around for a long time and things like that. And so because of that, if those interpretations are being massively expanded to doing things that we've seen that are unprecedented in this country's history, such as punishing employers because their employees aren't taking certain medicines, or such as locking down people from their jobs, or such as simultaneously while allowing people that politically disagree, like Black Lives Matter, to subvert the very CDC orders and guidelines that were being issued and specific local ordinances that were being issued. And so it would be the equivalent of this. If Biden passes an order that says OSHA should say that employers can't of certain companies can't hire anyone that's a man under the age of 30, that's fine because evidence shows that men under the age of 30 are more likely to be involved in accidents. Therefore, that's helping work. Please, let me finish.
Holy fucking shit.
I understand using your own logic against you will get you exasperated, and the need to constantly interrupt because you can't keep up intellectually. But if you allow me to finish my point, then you then you could struggle and try to talk about the 10th Amendment or something that has nothing to do with anything again, if you like. So they would make the argument, if OSHA did that, you would say, oh, well, that's not an expansion of power. That's not tyranny, because OSHA has the right to regulate workplace safety. The problem's not that OSHA has the right to regulate it or that the states have the right to do things that aren't outlined in the Constitution. The problem is the way that it's being used. Ways that are anti-scientific, ways that are hypocritical, that are favoring one political group over another, and ways that are unprecedented in this country's history. That's the problem.
Okay, so now, okay. So, first of all, OSHA has made these requirements in the past. OSHA has taken the position that employers can absolutely require influenza vaccines, for example. So, under the guise of a current pandemic, they are absolutely allowed to mandate other vaccinations in the past. Other vaccinations now. Secondly, to address your bizarre claim that, like, well, if they said they can discriminate against men, so there's a big difference between discriminating against someone for being a man versus discriminating against someone for choosing not to take a safe and effective vaccine just because they're scared. So, like, again, I'm not saying anything about the 10th Amendment, my dude. You can go off on your big tangent because I came in here prepared right away because I knew what you do is you gish gallop. You spew a ton of points here. You're literally all over the place. You're like, casinos, the teachers, the mandating, the tyranny. And I'm like, bruh, I'm trying to respond, but you're like constructing this gigantic narrative by just construing a bunch of lies and wrong information. So again, I'm just going to repeat this thing once again, since you seem to be repeating your point over and over again. Also, I guess I can do the same, but OSHA has the right to do this. They have mandated these things in the past, and you keep saying they're going to punish these poor employers for not vaccinating their... Yes, OSHA punishes the poor employers for not keeping an eye on workplace safety. That's how this works. Second of all, I wanted to address something I didn't get to address earlier.
Sounds like a gish gallop here. Second of all.
No, I was...
Let him finish out, Rob.
That wasn't even a gish. That was not a gish gallop at all. But second of all, what you said about casinos staying open, I'm not sure what you talked about. I Googled that when you were saying that, and it said that they were largely closed because of COVID. And also teachers not being forced to take the vaccine. Maybe in some places, what I see is that at least 28 states require it, and California actually became the first state to require teachers get the COVID-19 vaccination. So maybe I got misinformation there, but yeah, I just wanted to, set the record straight there really quickly.
He gave you a lot of time there, Hunter, so let's give him enough time to respond to all that, okay?
First off, constantly when I debate people on the left, what happens is they all have a hive mind. So probably a smarter lefty like Destiny, he saw me debate him and use the word gish gallop. And so inferior lefties like Hunter have to just repeat what they say. The people that say gish gallop say it because they're unable to formulate their own thoughts and arguments against what I'm saying, so they have to make attacks like that. Secondly, The only person here that was conflating points and things like that was Hunter, who constantly talked about the 10th Amendment and then OSHA and said, well, I'm talking about the 10th Amendment and OSHA, and kept conflating the 2 points. So just something to point out there. He says that this has been done in the past, that OSHA we've seen that they've ruled that companies are allowed to enforce vaccines on their employees. That is completely different than forcing companies to force their employees to have vaccines. And once more, Hunter will not be able to show you any time in history that this occurred. Keep in mind that his big contention to my opening was, this isn't an increase in government power and tyranny because this stuff has happened before. Show me one example of the OSHA or the federal government punishing employers because their employees didn't take vaccines. I'll wait. He can't be able to do that.
Sure.
He talks
So
about
can I respond to
casinos,
that?
real quick. He talked about casinos. There was a famous court case in Nevada that said that groups of 50 or more could not gather at churches. However, those groups were allowed to gather at casinos. And the reason for this was the same reason that Governor Murphy in New Jersey allowed liquor stores to be open but not churches, because it gets the state revenue. That's why, because this is about control, and it's one of the reasons that they went after churches so significantly. I would like to hear him explain a court decision that says that 50 people engaged in a church activity are more likely to spread COVID than 50 people engaged in gambling and pushing slot machines. Lastly, he talks about the teachers' unions. I'm willing to see the link that teachers in California are forced to get the vaccine. My reading, I could be wrong about that as well, so I'm happy to look at any link you have. My reading of it was that the teachers still in California do not have to be vaccinated. However, children do. And if that's the case, I'll happily read whatever you have that says that's correct or that's incorrect. But let me ask you this. If that's correct, do you think that this is a huge problem with the government of California? Because I assume you acknowledge that adults are far more likely, even vaccinated adults, are more likely to contract, spread, and die from COVID than children. So why would we be forcing the children to be vaccinated but not the adults?
So before we get back to that, yeah, I'm not going to answer. I don't really need to answer to this one Nevada example. I did look it up, and I think what you're getting at is that it looked like at first there was some kind of thing where you're right, the casino could have a larger capacity than the church. It was 25% to 50%, which is pretty silly. I can acknowledge that 100%. Listen, here's the thing. I can acknowledge that there have been some instances where some of these mandates may have not been entirely fair and absolutely needed to be changed around, while also recognizing that this is not some act of tyranny. By your logic, the DMV is an act of tyranny. It's just a government channel that does something and benefits the public. Just if the government does something, it is not tyranny. And again, I'd like to back up because my claim was not, it's okay because it's happened before. That is a ridiculous, a summary of what my claim was. My claim was rather that if you're going to make the claim that this is tyranny, you need to show me how this is an expansion of government control. And I know you're going to go back to OSHA again, and then we're going to go back to how actually OSHA is able to do this. They are able to punish other employers for not mandating workplace safety, and then we're going to go back in the same circle. But lastly, with the liquor store thing, the reason liquor stores stayed open is because some people, unfortunately, have an alcohol dependence. And if you shut down liquor stores, you're going to see more people in the hospital, filling up hospital beds with alcohol, I guess, lack of alcohol poisoning in that case, right? But there are some explanations there that, although they don't seem right, they make sense if someone has an alcohol addiction. But lastly, I guess if you want to talk about the children getting vaccinated or whatnot, I'm not sure any mandates are for kids getting vaccinated yet. I thought that they're still developing vaccines for children. As far as for kids getting vaccinated against polio and whatnot, we already require this. And I know you're going to say, well, these are old vaccines, which I'm not sure why that matters. The mRNA vaccine has been heavily studied. It's been studied for decades, actually. The mRNA vaccine, research into the mRNA vaccine has been going on, like I said, for decades, 50 plus years back. So I don't know. It's just you're making a lot of points at once, so then I have to respond to a lot of points. Do you want to try to have
Yeah, something I was going to suggest. I'm going to let Rob take it and respond to what you were saying. But maybe we can move in a little more concisely and also discuss the actual efficacy of the vaccines themselves and this type of thing as well, if you guys don't mind. Rob, I'll let you take it from here.
Sure. So real quick on the alcohol thing, Phil Murphy said this on Tucker's show. Well, people rely on alcohol for their mental well-being and physical addiction. You don't think people rely on church for their mental well-being? You don't think in a time where we see suicides are going through the roof that canceling church services was something that could directly lead to that? I happen to know many people of faith, and going to church is far more important to them than the alcoholic's ability to get liquor at a liquor store. particularly when there are other venues that you could get liquor that was still open, such as grocery stores. So that's a nonsensical explanation. On the real quick on the California thing, I didn't hear a response. The mandate from Gavin Newsom said that as soon as the FDA approves vaccines for children, then children will be forced to be vaccinated to go to school. That's what the mandate says. Right.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's
okay.
Good. Yeah.
And yet, teachers,
if it's
do you
approved,
have a problem?
Yes, absolutely.
So, okay. So then, why would you force children to have the vaccine, but not adults, not the teachers?
So the teachers do have to get vaccinated.
Can you show me the link?
Sure. Go ahead and Google, are teachers forced to take COVID vaccine? California.
Right. Okay.
California on August 12th, California on Wednesday became the first state to require teachers and other staff to provide proof of COVID-19 vaccination or else have to undergo weekly tests. So
Hunter,
again, it's like, this is kind of a move here.
So I can get it down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
From U.S. News. California on Wednesday became the first state to require proof. The announcement made by Governor Gavin Newsom, to give parents confidence that their children are safe. We are urging all school staff to get vaccinated. All right. Yep.
All right, I'll look into it. I could be wrong about this, but my understanding is that that's not the case. That the teachers' union.
So obviously,
well, we got. He made the claim. He's
this.
putting it in the chat so that you can review it, Rob.
Right. I see. I got the
bite. Listen, I will bite the bullet on this now. I don't think you're correct because based on what I'm reading, it looks like teachers are also forced. But if you weren't going to force the teachers to get the vaccine and then force kids to get the vaccine, that would be very dumb. Yes, I would easily bite the bullet on that and say I would say that's stupid. In order for the vaccine to be most effective, as many people as possible should absolutely be getting the vaccine.
And just the last point I'll make on the control, and then we could go. I'll leave you take the topic where you want. He's relying on saying that there hasn't me saying that there's tyranny and a mass increase in government control. That's just not true because of things that happened in the past. I'll leave it to the audience. Have you seen in your lifetime you can't go grocery shopping unless you have proof of a certain vaccine? You can't go visit your parents in nursing homes. You can't go to your job. You can't go to church. One of the largest transfers of wealth in the history of this country, from the poor and working class to the upper class. All of this was the result of lockdowns and massive stimulus. Now we could even see Joe Biden. He's blaming everything. Everything is because of the unvaccinated. Everything. That's his claim. He's blaming the economy on the unvaccinated. He's blaming ships that are lined up on the unvaccinated. All of these things he's blaming. I'll just ask the audience. It's clear that we'll go back and forth without resolution on this, but ask yourself, can you tell me, I remember 10 years ago under the swine flu or under MRSA, right, where I couldn't go to work for 4 months, or that even though the head of the CDC, Robert Redfield, said that lockdowns were killing more children, locking down schools were killing more children than COVID, we still decided against all science to lock down schools in many areas. Like, this is an intrusion on our freedoms unlike I've ever seen in my lifetime. And for Hunter to say, no, it's just not true, that's not happening, I'll leave it to the audience to determine objectively whether or not that's the case.
I can respond to that, sure. So I'll kind of wrap up, make my kind of closing statement on this too. So what Rob is doing basically is trying to appeal to your emotions and make you basically feel sad for the people that can't go grocery shopping or something. At the end of the day, the states have a right to mandate quarantines and mandate lockdowns. So if we want to look at an 1824, I know that was out of your lifetime, Rob, so you probably don't remember it. That's okay, but it's happened. The court precedent is there. In 1824, the Supreme Court ruled that it was acceptable, again, with the 10th Amendment. And what we are seeing, by the way, is state restrictions. So that absolutely applies with the 10th Amendment here. And in 1902, the Supreme Court directly addressed a state's power to quarantine an entire geographical area. So the court precedent is there. The states have the right to mandate quarantines, which is what you were complaining about, and the lockdowns under the 10th Amendment. So what Rob Noerr is actually doing is trampling on the Constitution. He is spitting in the face of George Washington and our founding fathers, who George Washington, by the way, massive fan of forced inoculation. He actually said that all children should be forced to be inoculated against smallpox, even if the parents resist. And he also forced his army to be inoculated against smallpox as well, even though it was greatly unpopular at the time. So, Rob, you're trampling on the Constitution. You're spitting in the face of George Washington, all because you're scared of taking a safe and effective vaccine. That's what this sounds like to me. And again, I'm going to talk about OSHA. I'm going to talk about the states' rights. We're talking both about the federal authority and the state authority. That's why OSHA and the 10th Amendment keep on coming up. I know for some reason it seems to be challenging for you to follow that, but yes, the 10th Amendment applies to the states, and OSHA is a government agency And again, OSHA punishes employers all the time for failing to enforce workplace safety. Without OSHA, we would all be in a worse place. Well, those of us who, I guess, have a job that would require OSHA or whatever. But again, this is within the states' rights and within the federal government's rights. This is not an expansion of power. This isn't even an executive order. So
I'll just say real quick, only the left could say you're spitting in the face of the Constitution if you're not for forcing someone to get a vaccine before they can get groceries.
Well, you are. It's literally
it's
a constitutional right.
Show me where the Constitution says that they could force you to get a vaccine to get groceries.
Holy shit.
Show me where. I didn't see the word vaccine in the 10th Amendment. That's weird.
Okay. So anyways,
the 10th Amendment
wait. Does there need to be a wait, because that was something so stupid what you just said.
Sure.
So do you think that the Constitution needs to say the state has a right to mandate vaccines? That's the 13th Amendment. Really? Are you serious right now?
No, what I'm saying is you keep talking about the 10th
safety.
Amendment, which clearly says that anything that's not specifically outlined in the Constitution, that when that issue comes up, it's the right of the state. Saying then that, well, because that exists, that means that the state could say, you're not allowed to go grocery shopping unless you've had this particular vaccine is nonsense. And to say it's spitting in the face of the Constitution.
It's true.
No, it's not. The 10th Amendment, you might say that
so
there are other
the Constitution is nonsense.
That's not what
this
I'm
is
saying.
Rob up here.
And
Once again, trampling on the Constitution. The Constitution
and literally,
is
we started this
guy.
off with you alluding to the fact that if Texas went against the OSHA mandate, that Texas wouldn't be allowed to do that.
I did not allude to that at all. I actually said that Texas. No, I didn't. I said Texas might actually be allowed
What do you mean,
to do
might?
that.
It's very clear in the Constitution, right?
Okay, so Texas has what I mean is that Texas can do that, but it's arguably that's more of a controlling move considering they're breaking away from precedent. When in Texas, because in Texas there are already vaccination mandates in all kinds of places. Is this going to ban vaccination mandates for just like public school? Like I don't know. It just kind of seems like it's all over the place. But either way, it sounds to me like you said the Constitution was nonsense. We'll just leave that up to the audience to determine. But
that's what it sounds
either
like.
way, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next topic? Because I think that we kind of made our closing here already.
Yeah, we were going to look at vaccine efficacy.
Sure. So
and health ramifications and this kind of thing.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rob.
Given that you're in favor of forcing children to have the vaccine, correct?
If they're going to go to public school, then yes, they should have they should be vaccinated.
So just if they go to public school, what if they want to go grocery shopping? Should they have to have the vaccine?
I don't know. I'm not a lawmaker. Why are you asking me a bunch of 20 questions? Do you want to make an argument?
Yeah,
you're asking me like
in order to have a conversation.
I don't know. It is appropriate for him to be able to cross-examine your position. So
that's fair, but it's just okay. That's fair.
He has to be able to understand it before he can make an argument.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or else I'll get accused of arguing against people that aren't here. So my question is: do you acknowledge? Where's your evidence to suggest that children should have to be vaccinated? How many children have died of COVID in the United States?
Well, it's not just about death rates. This seems to be something that we look a lot at when we should actually be just looking at like the harmful effects of COVID. So overall, like kids, for example, they're not at a very big risk of like dying from COVID, but you know what? They can still spread COVID, which puts other people at risk. So this is like a common conversation that we have here. Like I'm not really too interested in having like a breakdown of how many kids have gotten COVID versus like kids can carry COVID, even if they don't die from it, they can still carry it. They can transmit it to other people. And keep in mind that, again, even with people getting vaccinated, since we have the Delta variant, which is both more contagious and spreads more easily from children, it only makes sense that the more people that are not vaccinated, the more likely we are to experience breakthrough infections, and this pandemic is going to continue.
Okay, so let me do it this way, right? Let's get to where ideologically we come from in our positions, right? So let me just ask you this: do you think the government has the right to force people to take vaccines because they spread it to other people, or because and you have the right to force people to make choices that are healthy for themselves? Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, yeah. So it's not nearly as much about the government protecting the individual. It is much more about the other people thing.
Gotcha.
So like, I mean,
that's fair because certain people are on different sides of that. So it's important to know where you're at. Given that, Joe Biden, when he gave his speech talking about the mandates, he said that if you're vaccinated, fully vaccinated, that you have a 1 in 160,000 chance a day of being hospitalized with COVID. Do you agree with those numbers?
So what Rob is doing now is trying to pivot away from the main subject and ask me specific questions. And if I agree with some weird quote I've never heard about from Joe Biden, that changes absolutely nothing and really has no bearing on this conversation. No, that sounds like an exaggeration and probably doesn't mean anything. Thankfully, we don't need to listen to Joe Biden for shit. We can just look at the numbers and actually look at the rates of hospitalizations among vaccinated with COVID and unvaccinated with COVID.
He did say we don't have to listen to Joe Biden. You heard it
Thank
right
you.
here
I'll
on the
take that.
Crucible.
This is the thing is I already am somewhat familiar with Rob Noerr's position, and I understand that you don't trust the quote unquote experts, and I assume that means Biden and Fauci maybe in this aspect, but like, fine, fuck it. Fuck Joe Biden, fuck Fauci. You don't need to trust any of these fucks to look at the actual real world data that we have that shows that this vaccine is safe, beneficial, and effective. And I also really disagree with Rob's perspective that only like older people should get it, because again, the immune and compromised people that are already at risk are put at higher risk when we don't get vaccinated, because just if we're not going to die, well, we don't want to spread COVID to our neighbor. We also don't want to have to suffer through the possible long-term negative effects of COVID. I don't want to risk infertility. I don't want to risk all this shit. I would much rather just get a safe and effective vaccine and then go about my life and make sure that I'm, doing it in the interest of myself. I personally chose to get vaccinated because I want to be safe, but also I do recognize the moral obligation that I feel that I have anyway to get vaccinated, because in order for society to function, we all have to make certain sacrifices in some ways or another.
Okay,
so yeah,
so a couple things to say. One, for someone who has the nerve to say someone's gish galloping, you're doing a damn fine job of it yourself. Second, I thought we were focusing the conversation. Notice how I was asking short questions and then you went off on big 3-minute tirades. So just so you know, BPF, I will be responding in kind in a large block like that because we tried to break it down and Hunter didn't.
Well, if you have to be able to respond to every single thing that's said.
Don't worry. This is a steel trap, man. Don't worry. No problem. He says that it's irrelevant what Joe Biden says. So the person that's passing the executive order and the order suggesting these things, it doesn't matter if their data that they're responding or basing that on is correct. That's how insane these positions are. The truth is, people like Hunter are okay forcing anything on people as long as it's some acceptance of them. They're okay with forcing other people to do it. They don't give a shit if the people that are forcing that have incorrect data. Keep in mind that we're currently censoring people on social media and other platforms that want to ask questions about this. But at the same time, Hunter is saying, of course we shouldn't fucking trust Fauci and Biden. They're exaggerating with their numbers. It's bullshit numbers. But we exist in a system that says that if you want to question that, you could arguably be kicked up. As BPF himself knows, well, I didn't say you said that, but that's the reality. So surely you're against the censorship.
No, that's also not what I said. That's you're just.
What did you didn't say that we shouldn't that Joe Biden's numbers was bullshit? Who gives a fuck what he says? You didn't say that?
Yeah, I said in that and with okay. I realize now I'm gonna have to be hyper specific with you because I can tell that you're arguing in extremely bad faith here. So
what a fucking loser you are.
Hold on, wait a second, buddy.
Man. No, none of that, man.
Just so you know, moving really quick to like the social media thing, like that starts to seem like more like a gish gal. But anyway. When Joe Biden said that specific quote at that specific time, that sounds like bullshit. Okay? Is that a little more clear for you?
So, Joe, and my point is
what
this.
I was saying is I was making a broader point, actually, which is that you don't need to trust Joe Biden or Fauci. I didn't say they exaggerate their numbers, don't listen to them. I said, if you don't trust the experts, that's fine. You don't even have to trust the experts in order for the real world data to continuously indicate that this vaccine is working just as it's supposed to.
We'll get to the real world data. You had a large chunk. I generously let you clarify your position.
Hang on, Rob, he's almost done. Let him finish.
I just really quickly wanted to say you're not censored for like shitting on Fauci or disagreeing with Joe fucking Biden, okay? You're censored and banned from YouTube if you like spread just vaccine misinformation, more broadly speaking. This does not include criticizing Fauci, okay?
That's bullshit. For example, Ron DeSantis himself has been pulled from YouTube for having a panel of doctors that talked about natural immunity being more
That was
prevalent.
COVID misinfo.
No, it's not COVID misinfo. All the data shows that. We had people that were kicked off for touting monoclonal medications and things like that, which now the science agrees with it. We had people that were kicked off.
How many people get natural immunity?
Please.
You got to let him finish.
Right. So, like, this idea that people were for just being censored for saying real disinformation. Again, the mark of the authoritarian. He's admitting. Why isn't Joe Biden removed then if he touted the misinformation in his own speech of 1 in 160,000 hospitalized? That's misinformation, right? He should be censored, correct?
What are you talking about?
You just said that number's bullshit. So why wouldn't he be
censored? Is this how desperate you are?
No, I'm not desperate. Hunter, I tried to enter this debate
Joe
like
Biden
not being
should,
petty.
No. Joe Biden, you're right. Joe Biden should be censored because he misspoke in one quote that I've never seen.
Okay. Right. This isn't misspeaking.
Right, so
again, please, you had a large block to talk. Please, you had a large block to talk to us.
He did give you a large block, Hunter. You got to let him finish.
So again,
I know but when I asked you a question, it was a concise question. What he's doing is he's doing an inquiry. So just let him finish his inquiry.
And BPF, this is how this often happens. You try to have a good faith discussion, asking short questions back and forth, and then they just go on for 4 minutes.
I can't get involved in that.
I know, but that's how it works. I know the game.
It is fair to have an inquiry.
Right. So anyways, this wasn't just like he said this off the cuff. This was a pre-written speech that was given to the American people telling them why this unprecedented action of an executive order or executive pressure being placed on businesses needs to force this mandate. And in that was written by other people that arguably should have had, or that you would assume they had their factual data correct, said that 1 in 160,000 chance if you're fully vaccinated. Right. Now, the reason this is important is because we could get into the data that you want. You have a 1 in 160,000 chance of being hospitalized with COVID a day if you're fully vaccinated. That was the number that Joe Biden said. The reason
unvaccinated?
If you're vaccinated, a 1 in 160,000 chance of being hospitalized with COVID a day. That's verbatim in Joe Biden's transcript of his vaccine mandate that he pushed forth. Now, if that's true, then your only argument for why we should force vaccines on other people is because we need to stop the spread. But if people themselves choose to engage in risky health behaviors, that's on them. The overwhelming amount of people that want to be, please be quiet. The overwhelming amount of people that want to be fully vaccinated are fully vaccinated, and therefore they're not at risk, according to the numbers that Joe Biden said, any credible risk. In fact, that risk of 1 in 160,000 of being hospitalized, that would be 365 out of 160,000 a year just to be hospitalized. That puts you at about 0.2%. Now, only a very small portion of the people that are hospitalized suffer significant long-term effects or death, and so that number would be even smaller. So we're talking about people more likely to be hospitalized falling down the stairs than being hospitalized of COVID if they're fully vaccinated, according to the numbers that Joe Biden used to justify the mandate itself. So I'm sorry, your argument of we need to force other people to get vaccinated in order to protect the people that made the choice to get vaccinated is nonsense. And if you have data that you would like to show that contradicts Joe Biden's claim, I would be happy to see it.
Sure. So do you know how many people go on to get natural immunity after getting COVID?
Almost a huge percentage of those that have COPTINs, particularly symptomatic COVID, develop antibodies.
Do you know how many, like the chunk of percentage that doesn't?
No, I don't know the
close
specific.
It's close to like 40%. So
can you post
getting COVID is, yeah, sure. Getting COVID is not always just like a surefire way of anything. It's true that like natural immunity again is pretty good. It's strong. It's beneficial 100%. I'm not going to say it's not good, but the thing is that when you have natural immunity, one, like I said, we don't always know if getting COVID is actually going to lead to getting natural immunity necessarily. And two, we also want to look at natural immunity wanes much quicker, usually wanes within around like 90 days, whereas the vaccine doesn't start to wane until like 6 months is what a lot of the trials showed. So natural immunity isn't really that good. And also, if you have natural immunity and then you get vaccinated, what this does is it actually gives you something called hybrid immunity, and it boosts your immunity even more. So again, if you have natural immunity, that's great, that's cool, but like there's not really a reason why you shouldn't get vaccinated still. Like it would just give you further protection at the end of the day.
So first off, I believe you're just inaccurate when you talk about natural immunity waning faster. That's not true. The largest study on this in Israel showed that actually natural immunity, it does wane. It does appear to wane somewhat.
I'm sorry. Can you link it though so I can get it down?
Yeah, I know exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah, sure. Give me a second. It takes a second to link this stuff, but here is the link. But it actually shows that natural immunity actually does last longer. There's a litany of studies. I have a link to like 30 studies that talks about natural immunity. I'll post the link there too. But we don't know exactly. It is true that we don't know exactly how quick it wanes, but it does appear that natural immunity is not only more effective in the short term, but is longer lasting than being vaccinated. Now, it is true that a lot of reports said, well, but you could slightly up your efficacy if you decide to have natural immunity, or if you have natural immunity and if you get the vaccine. But the problem with that is, and here's the link to the other studies I'll put up. 1 second.
Keep in mind that what you're about to shit on, this hybrid immunity thing, actually came from the same Israeli preprint that you're citing.
So the question is
Israeli
this. So let me ask you
preprint
this.
that you just cited, you're now shitting on what it also talked about hybrid immunity and
what
explained why
it's
still
talking
good to get
about.
vaccinated.
If you want, I'll get to it specifically. So what it's talking about is a slight uptick if you have the vaccine and natural immunity to your protection. The question is that slight uptick, one, worth infringing on people's freedoms, and second, worth the possible side effects that we get from the vaccine? So I'd like to read you something from a doctor that analyzed that study. This is from Dr. Aaron Cariati. And I'll just read this. It won't take long. It's about 10 small Twitter posts. My response to the following claim, okay, yes, natural immunity is superior to vaccine immunity, but people should get it anyways, is as follows.
Can he not read? I don't think he should be allowed to read.
Yeah,
10
slow down a little bit, Rob.
Sure.
That's not. I can't respond to all that at all.
Okay, I'll link the
conceded.
studies. So the studies that are linked are two.
Hang on. He's almost done. Just let him finish his quote, and then we'll move right back to you, Hunter, and you'll have plenty of time to respond, I promise. Go ahead, Rob.
Right. So if the previously infected that had natural immunity had 99.74% immunity, and once they got vaccinated, that changed to 99.86. That is a difference in 0.12% immunity. So we're talking about someone who's 99.74% protected now being 99.86. That's almost nothing. But there are adverse risk effects. And so the conclusion when we go with the adverse risk effects is the following. To prevent one case of asymptomatic reinfection, not symptomatic, but asymptomatic, which is basically nothing. To prevent one case, we would cause over 75 cases of clinically significant adverse effects by forcing people with proven anti-natural immunity to take the vaccine. For every one
is this what that doctor on Twitter said?
It's what the studies, if you look at the study between the Israeli study and the UK study that talked about, one, the Israeli study that talked about the percentage that you get of efficacy more if you've had natural immunity and add the vaccine on it. And second, if you look at the likelihood of adverse effects from having the vaccine.
Now you got to give him enough time to respond. Sure. There's a lot there for him to break down, Rob.
Yeah, I mean,
if he wants to inquire, Hunter, if you want to inquire, you can inquire. You can do an inquiry. It's okay.
I would just like to say that, like, adverse effects, I mean, what does that mean? Like, you might have people that don't feel too good for like a day, but like I can cite to you just as easily a systematic, or I'm sorry, hold on, let me pull this up really quickly. Just pull this up really quick. I'm going to make this quickly, don't worry. This is the efficacy and safety of COVID-19 vaccines, a systematic review and meta-analysis of randomized clinical trials. And it said that the mRNA-based vaccines for COVID showed the highest efficacy after first and second dose, respectively. And then it does say that the mRNA-based vaccinations had higher side effects. But then it goes on to say, remarkably, few experienced extreme adverse effects and all stimulated robust immune responses. So I'm showing here on my screen just the this chart here showing the efficacy rates. I can put it in the chat as well. This again comes from PubMed.
So like does it differentiate between the efficacy of natural immunity?
It's his inquiry. Let him go through his inquiry. Bro.
No, because I'm not really too worried about arguing with you on natural immunity. Like, I've already acknowledged that natural immunity is a good thing. I'm not arguing against it. I think that if you have natural immunity, that's cool. The thing with natural immunity for me is that it like getting COVID doesn't always guarantee you have natural immunity. And I know you had that one number that showed like a marginal uptick. I was just looking at this study here that shows a significant one. So I'm not really exactly sure, but I'm not too concerned again on getting hung up on that, because we more like, yeah, natural immunity, it's a good thing. It's better to have natural immunity of course than nothing at all. But I'm more interested in just talking about the general efficacy of this vaccine ultimately. And that's why I wanted to cite this meta-analysis, because I think that it really does a good job at showing the one, positive effects of this vaccine, and two, that in this meta-analysis with these randomized clinical trials, there weren't that many adverse events actually reported. Now, I know you might cite VAERS to me, and that's fine, but anybody can add anything to VAERS, and that's not really very helpful data at the end of the day.
So first, that's not true. The CDC itself says that VAERS is helpful data. They might say that it's not the end all be all, but it's certainly helpful data. Else, why would they collect that data? It's clearly helpful to them.
It's not verified. The thing is, so for example, you couldn't say well, VAERS said that there's 700,000 new COVID adverse events reported as an argument against the vaccine, because we don't know how many of those adverse effects are actually caused by the vaccine. They haven't been vetted. They haven't been verified. Of course, VAERS should exist. We need a place where people can go to report what they might believe to be an adverse effect. Sure. But all I'm saying is that that's not very fair data, considering that I could go and report on VAERS that I had explosive diarrhea after the fucking vaccine and the vaccine did that to me. And then it will go up on VAERS. There's no real way to verify that data, where when we do have real verified data here, we can see just this is extremely an effective vaccine. And let me mention,
how long are you going to go on here? This inquiry is quite lengthy.
I don't know what I'm do you want to cut in? Do you want
yeah, sure. I was trying to cut in.
If you're worried about the adverse events, you're going to really hate
we can't hear
COVID.
you, BPF.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Your inquiry was a little long too. Okay. I'm going to allow it.
We both have been I feel like we both get the floor and then just start talking a lot.
Yeah, and that's okay. Hunter, you can finish your inquiry. It's fine.
All I wanted to say is that if you really think that the adverse effects of the vaccine are that bad, then you're really going to hate getting COVID, because the effects of COVID would be way worse and also have way harsher long-term effects. Whereas the vaccine, you might feel shitty for a day or two, but in almost every single case, people are fine.
Okay, so the problem is the data that you're citing doesn't differentiate between people with natural immunity versus people that have the vaccine and the efficacy of what the people with natural immunity have. What it says is, but if we have them be vaccinated too, that could be good as well. The question is, how many cases would it prevent? So if we take everyone I'll just ask you straightforward. I don't need to go on forever. How many cases would be prevented if we forced everyone with natural immunity to take the vaccine? What's your study say?
I don't know again, I thought we already conceded the natural immunity thing.
Okay.
BPF, am I confused? Didn't we already move past the natural immunity thing?
What?
Am I wrong here?
I'm
not
again,
sure what this
BPF. Muted.
BPF, we can't hear you.
Well, he's letting me take over. It's time to talk about Jesus.
Hang on. Hang on. Listen, it's okay at this point for him to cross-examine what you're saying. Okay, it's his turn to do that. I know that you think he's moved past that, but he has an opportunity now where he can cross-examine your position. Go ahead, Rob.
Right. We haven't moved past natural immunity because you're recommending that those that have natural immunity should be forced to be vaccinated, right? And the question is, okay, if we're going to take a very unusual step, and you could say, but there's precedent for it and things like that, fine. Even if we say that there's precedent for it, which there's not in the way that this is being done with the vaccine that's so fastly developed and things like that, but even if we do concede that there would be precedent, which I'm not, but for the sake of argument I will, you would have to say why we're allowed, what's the threshold for forcing people to take a medication against their will? What would that threshold be? And if it would save, maybe, if your argument is, well, if we force people with natural immunity and children to take the vaccine, it would cut cases down by 70%. That would be one thing. But you can't give that number. You say, no, I don't care. I recognize natural immunity is good, and I don't know what the number of, if we force them to be vaccinated, how many cases would be cut down. But I've moved past that. That's not moving past that. And if you're going to force people to take Medicaid, real quick, I'll finish.
You can't. Yeah, you can finish, and then of course you can respond, Hunter.
The impetus is on you if you're recommending that the government force people to take medication against their will to prove that it would have a significant effect, and you're just saying, no, I concede natural immunity is good. Let's move on.
Okay, so no, I'm not at all. So first of all, natural immunity, like I already explained, arguably wanes faster. And even if it doesn't, again, you just have a more predictable immune response when you go with the vaccine. I don't know why you're so hung up on this natural immunity thing. I don't have data comparing how people with natural immunity fared with the blah, 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 blah. We actually, you know what? Hold on. I could be wrong there. I think there is CDC data that explains the natural immunity thing and shows that in a lot of instances, like I said, people don't even go on to develop antibodies. I'm not too sure what the main. Can we talk a little bit more about why you're so hung up on the natural immunity thing? The thing is that if we want to achieve herd immunity, then yeah, upwards to 90% of the population needs to be double vaxxed. And right now we're only at 54%.
Where's that data that 90% needs to be double vaxxed?
Sure. I can find the source.
Fauci said 70, then 80, then 85.
I didn't say any numbers. You put numbers in my mouth.
Fauci said.
I'm just now saying.
I said Fauci said 70 was needed for herd immunity. Then he said 80. Then he said 85. And also,
Okay, so
the problem
the
is,
number
I am
might
unaware
vary,
of anyone.
but-
I'm unaware of anyone saying that number has to be the percentage of people vaccinated. It needs to be the percentage of people with antibodies, which means we would.
All right, let me just speed through some of these points.
You have to let him respond too, Rob.
Yeah, I'm going to just speed. I think I'm just going to speed through these points here because
let him.
at this
hang
point,
on.
Rob,
Just hear me out, Hunter. I know you guys are having a spirited back and forth. I love the spirited back and forth, but I don't want it to get to a place where you're talking past each other and nobody can understand what the hell you're talking about. So if you can start again, Hunter, and we'll walk through this. That way the audience can understand and the moderators can understand. Go ahead, man.
Sure. I kind of forgot where I was going to go with this because there are just so many things I need to try to address all at once. So, I mean, even earlier you mentioned like this sped up rushed vaccine thing. I don't know who you voted for. I don't know if you're like a fan of Donald Trump or not, but actually Project Warp Speed was something that I credit Trump with because it was a really good thing that did expedite the process of developing this vaccine, but it certainly did not cut corners. So just to make that clear, first and foremost, when you say, oh, well, they sped it up, they rushed it, not true. There have been human clinical trials with mRNA vaccines going back to 2013. mRNA vaccines and COVID vaccines have been being studied for 50 plus years, and we already had the general understanding of a vaccine for coronavirus, and then along came COVID-19. It was a perfect storm that worked together with Project Warp Speed. Thanks to Donald Trump. Shout out to Donald Trump. I'm going to credit him. I'm not afraid to do it. He did Project Warp Speed, and that absolutely benefited us. So I push back immediately on your claim that this was like a rushed, expedited thing, because I feel like when you say that, you're trying to make it sound like it's not as safe.
That's going to get clipped. That's going to get clipped that you gave Donald Trump credit for. I'm clipping it right in the clips, guy.
Go for it. Guys, I'm not a partisan hack. I don't give a fuck.
Your vote next year is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Or no, 2024.
All right.
I'm going to say, wait, is that like...
So to respond to 2 points here. First, the idea of this being rushed. It's not just that it's rushed, though that's part of it, and I'll get to in a second, but it's also that because it hasn't existed for a long time, we don't know the long-term effects of the vaccine. We just don't. It's impossible to know that. And there have been vaccines in the past that we've had to pull off the shelf after they've been approved for a certain period of time because we realized when we saw long-term effect, we have no way of knowing the long-term effects.
Vaccines, really?
Yes.
Because you asked... So, all right, you asked me for an example of the
Let
OSHA
him finish.
thing.
Let him finish, Hunter.
So, anyways, but
wanted
the
to
point
talk
of it
about
being
this.
rushed, I'll just say this real quick. The narrative from all sorts of experts, including the bulk of our mainstream media and the Democratic Party, was that it would be impossible. Donald Trump was talking out his ass, and he was just blowing smoke in the air when he said before the end of his first term that there would be a vaccine. That's what all the experts told us. They told us it over and over. Almost every expert was saying it's impossible. Trump's blowing. There's no evidence. You can go to the fact checkers like PolitiFact. You can go watch MSNBC and go to the New York Times and listen to what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were saying.
So do you believe them then?
The question is, the idea that you're saying what wasn't right, so you're saying that they all lied. That's your claim.
No, I'm asking, do you agree with MSNBC then? Because like
it has nothing to do with agreeing with them. It's the experts, medical experts in the field.
But you're the one
said
saying that it was rushed.
Please.
You're parroting right now to me MSNBC's point.
What I'm saying, Donald Trump would say, I don't have a problem. Let me be quite clear here. I don't have a problem with people that want to manually take the vaccine on their own free volition. That's fine. So the idea, they were anti-vaxxers for political reasons. They were saying this would be impossible.
Wait.
Please. They were saying this would be impossible.
BPF,
this
I need to appeal to the mod.
Because this would be. I'm just going to keep talking.
It's fair. You guys are. What's happening right now is you're in a sparring match, Hunter. Spar. You know what I mean? This is the sparring portion.
I want to actually focus on two different things he said here instead of going off on this big tangent about
you'll
how
get
the
your
media
chance.
all said this.
You went off on a bunch of stuff, so that's what I'm doing, right?
Hunter, really quick, Rob. Let me talk to him. Hunter, what's been happening right now is this. You're a berserker, level 5. You're meeting level 50 right now. This is all that's happening.
I don't. This is not how I am. We might talk fast, but holy shit, I'm trying to talk about just 2 points at once.
I know,
here.
I get it.
Rob wants to tell me a story.
We have to try to give equal time, man. We have to try to give equal time. So the thing is that if you cut in and he cuts in and you guys are having a back and forth, we can't step in on that. We can only step in when you guys are in an inquiry phase. So if you're going to have a back and forth, you have to have the back and forth. You determine how you want this to go. Would you rather zone in on these 2 points? Because if you would, Rob, would you agree to go ahead and do that?
Sure, he could zone in
okay.
if he's willing to not just expand for 5 minutes.
Right. So if you want to zone in on these 2 points, Hunter, we can do that. The floor is yours.
And the point was that there's never been a time, or the point was that we don't know the long-term effects of this thing, and also that it was rushed. So I just want to focus on these two things. So with the long-term effects thing, most vaccine negative side effects reveal themselves within like a couple hours to 2 months maximum. As far as my understanding, there's never actually been a time in history even where vaccines led to some long-term side effect, like 10, 15 years down the line. This is because vaccinations usually develop just a quick payload. They go in, you build up immunity, and then your body kind of discards the rest of it. Now, I could be wrong. It's possible, but usually vaccine side effects reveal themselves pretty early on. And again, mRNA vaccines have been being tested on humans since 2013.
Let's wrap it up. We were focusing in, right? Let's wrap it up.
Go. Yes, I'm still addressing the one point, Rob.
So I've seen data that suggests that we've had vaccines that were pulled off the shelf after they were on for months. And there are things that come from medication. Hell, we're just learning today something like aspirin. Oh, they said it was good. They say it's not. They say it's good. They say it's not. We have long-term effects from vaccines that occur all the time. Watch daytime television and you could see that there are lawsuits for people that have taken vaccines and other medication that we didn't see adverse effects in the initial phase, but we saw them years down the road, such as things like fertility, things like inflammation of the heart, and things like that. So it's just not true. And the point is, right, this is where you lose the debate on this, is if you're acknowledging that there are groups of people that are at almost no risk of serious effects of COVID, such as people with natural immunity or people that are young, children, etc., why would we force them to do something against their will when there's very little benefit to that for them and you're incurring risk to them? That's the problem. And I already read the data that showed that for every one asymptomatic case that we would prevent from vaccinating those with natural immunity, you would have 77 serious adverse effects.
So this kind of goes back to the no medication is 100% perfect thing, right? So like obviously aspirin, very different thing than a vaccine. Like I said, according to the doctors that I've read, there have been very few vaccine recalls. And if they have ever taken place, they're usually from the vaccine manufacturer. And it's not because the FDA doesn't usually step in with any kind of health related issue there. So usually no, vaccines, the negative side effects usually reveal themselves in a pretty short amount of time. Yeah. You keep saying, like, should we force kids to get something that could potentially hurt them? So again, I'm going to ask you, Rob, question here. Are you in favor of mandating other vaccines for kids?
Not in the way that we've seen done with COVID, but I will say this. It is far more reasonable for vaccines that have existed for years, for illnesses, or existed for years before we mandated them, that were limited to going to things like public schools, and were for illnesses that were higher case fatality rate.
Are you okay with so how do you feel about schools mandating vaccines? Yeah, like public schools mandating vaccines.
It's completely different. There's a question on each and every one of those vaccines, but I think it's in reasonability for public venues to say, look, you have to have certain protections. If those protections are long-term, we know the long-term effects of them, and they're for very serious illnesses. The question that this becomes, like, let me.
It doesn't have to be serious.
Let me throw an olive branch out to you here, right? I'm not advocating for complete anarchy and lack of government ability to do anything, and I would assume you're not saying that the government has the right to influence every area of our life. Is that fair?
Yes, of course I'm not saying that.
So then the question becomes, what is the threshold before the government's allowed to force these sort of things, right? And what we're talking about specifically is they're forcing things on populations because the vaccine mandate didn't make exemptions. It didn't say, exemption for children, for example, as we could see in California, or exemption for people with natural immunity, as we see with Biden's mandate, right? And so the question becomes, at what point, because you wouldn't say for the common cold, well, we're going to force before people go to school for the common cold, they have to take certain types of medication. Everyone has to prophylactically take medication against the common cold. We would say, well, no.
Well, we already do this we do this for other illnesses. So like
what?
COVID, for example. Well, we already mandate vaccines, right?
Like what? Give me an example of an illness that we do that for.
Tetanus. You have to get a vaccine for tetanus.
Something that the fatality rates are far higher, right? Not the common cold.
It's not just about, again, my dude, it's not just about fatality rates. It's not just about people dying. It's also about spreading it to the teachers. It's about spreading it maybe to someone who's old. It's about spreading it to someone who's maybe immune and compromised. If you want to, there are a lot of risks to other people. So again, if you said you're okay with public schools mandating certain vaccines for the kids, in this instance, I think we should really hone in on this one, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't see any states saying every child must be vaccinated in order to attend the playground. Like California, usually it's like
to go to school.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Right. So, yes, to go to school, exactly. But to go to school, you just acknowledge they have that right.
It's completely different because we're talking about this on a level of a vaccine that it's not even approved yet for children. And even once it is, we're talking about forcing immediately at the beginning of its approval, forcing these children to take it when they're at almost no risk whatsoever. Let me ask you a hypothetical question then. Let's hypothetically say
take other vaccines.
Please. But then so if tomorrow, if Hunter Biden gets, if a company Hunter Biden's connected to tomorrow says, oh, we have a vaccine for the common cold, we're going to approve it tomorrow. Now all kids have to take it immediately. You would say, yep, they have to. We've approved other vaccines. That's what you would say?
No, because the FDA approves vaccines. What do you?
Sure. Right. We had the FDA for again. What does
Keep
that have
asking
anything?
random
So if the
questions.
FDA approved
It makes it really look like you're winning the debate. By the way.
right. So if the
Do you
FDA
want to ask me
approved
another random question?
right. So if the FDA approved it, you would say yes. Then the children should have to be forced to take that vaccine or not go to school.
I'm confused why you're like acting shocked when you just said you're okay with schools mandating vaccines. So you're just against the school mandate specific COVID vaccine? Am I clear?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying
got
because
it.
there's
So, yeah,
not
so
a big
if it went
risk.
through-
There's not a big risk to children from
Sure,
COVID, and because
went
the
through the
vaccine is
FDA
brand
approval,
new
yeah.
and there are potential side
It's not
effects.
brand new.
And
So that's where I would push
yes,
back
it
on
is
it. Is
brand
that-
new. Okay,
No, it's
so
not.
how long
Is
is
that-
it? Did we have a
when
COVID
you say
vaccine
brand
before
new-
this? Yes.
Okay, my dude, usually when you say brand new, that means that it hasn't been tested or anything. If the vaccine is new on the market, then maybe fine. Maybe there you go. But if it's on the market to begin with and it's approved by the FDA, that means that it has gone through all the proper clinical trials, the randomized tests have been done, and the efficacy has been significantly tested.
That's not true. Just because it was approved by the FDA on an emergency basis, which again, even the FDA is not infallible, right? The difference is this: we know the long-term effects, for example, of the polio vaccine because it's existed for years, and it existed for years before we told kids that they had to have it before they went to school. Now, I've gone through the data and talked about how the kids weren't at risk. I want to ask this hypothetical question though: if hypothetically, I know you're not accepting this, but if hypothetically the vaccine caused more kids to be hospitalized than would be hospitalized from COVID, would you still say it was worth it to protect them from transmitting to adults?
Probably not, but if I don't know. Again, like we keep kind of going back to these hypotheticals when it's actually unnecessary to be going into this. Instead,
Hunter, you're losing the literal data debate.
You gotta let him respond, Rob. Let him respond.
I'm not losing any data debate. Sure. I'm asking you something very significant here, and it is you already said you're okay with them mandating other vaccines. You're only against this COVID vaccine because it is a, quote, brand new vaccine. If it is approved by the FDA, that means it's gone through the necessary testing. Okay, so the long-term effects, we do know the long-term effects.
Really?
Like I already said. Yes, like I already said, vaccine long-term effects usually manifest themselves within 2 months maximum.
Okay,
now you
can I ask a question real quick?
Here's the thing. No. One more thing, because you're accusing me of losing the data debate.
Sure.
But the problem is that the only thing you have now is a fearful future. So possibly we all turn into mutants in the future. So I don't want to get this vaccine, even though all the available data shows it's working. Studies have been done. Long-term effects have been investigated. And vaccines don't usually manifest long-term effects longer than 2 months down the line. So you need to tell me, actually, why you're okay trampling on other people's rights, freedoms, and liberties not to get sick, not to die, not to be infected with a preventable disease, all because you're scared of a shot.
Again, so we've gone through the specific data that talked about people with natural immunity, and it's similar with children, that they're so little at risk for having serious adverse effects of COVID that to stop one asymptomatic effect, to stop one asymptomatic,
let him finish, Hunter.
Right, to stop one asymptomatic case of COVID, we would have 77 serious adverse effects from the vaccine. You've lost that debate. You're just like, well, we're moving on from that.
Wait, where? All right. Do you want me to go look at your data? I mean, I guess we could go ahead and scroll
we
through.
can look at the data.
The natural immunity thing, again, when we're talking about children getting vaccinated in order to attend a public school, I'm just not sure, like, what else you want me to say to this? You keep saying, well, it's a new vaccine. It's a new vaccine.
I'm going to go on. I'm going to go on with my next point. I'm going to go on with my next point.
Let him finish too, Rob. Let him finish.
I mean, for God's sakes, he just went on for 4 minutes, and I speak for 30 seconds, then he goes on for 4 more minutes.
I'm looking at the clock, man.
You just rambled forever, Rob. And you're like, I don't even know what point you're trying to make. You're telling me that natural immunity is better, so vaccines like, can you help me understand a little bit more? Summarize your point for me.
Yes, the data shows that natural immunity is superior to vaccinated immunity, and the small efficacy that you incur by having both would mean to prevent one asymptomatic case we would cause 77 serious medical events to do so. And that's not a serious case of COVID that's being prevented. That's an asymptomatic case.
Let him finish, Hunter. Let him finish too.
I would like.
Let him finish too, Hunter. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. The same is true of children. The problem is that what Hunter is basically making this argument. If you're okay with the government arresting people for assault, then you're okay for the government arresting people that just verbally assault someone. You'd be okay with that. You'd be okay. Just because I'm okay with one type of vaccine that's been approved that is massively different than the situation we're seeing now doesn't mean, oh, well, as long as you're okay with schools requiring the polio vaccine, then we should force children to take this vaccine. That it's nonsense. It's a stupid point. And again, the more serious point that I'm making here is you have no data showing if we vaccinated children, how many cases of COVID we prevent. And the data, the only data that's being presented is me showing that both people with natural immunity and children are in fact, children are more protected from COVID than even vaccinated adults. And so the adverse effects that we know that occur, and there are adverse effects that are occurring now, we know that to stop one case of asymptomatic COVID, you would cause significant, and I can provide more evidence if you want. Here's evidence from...
You have plenty of time. Take what you need to respond.
Yeah, he keeps repeating that same thing. I don't really know where you're like, I know you saw that one data that said like people might have more negative side effects. Yeah, some people have adverse side effects to a vaccine, but usually they go away within a couple days. Again, I'm looking here at this Nebraska Medicine article talking about COVID-19 natural immunity versus vaccination. A third of infections don't get any protective antibodies. Natural immunity fades more quickly than vaccine immunity. These are different studies. One from the Israeli study. 65% of people with lower baseline antibody from infection to begin with completely lost their COVID-19 antibodies by 60 days. This is a study I can send you right here. You're telling me I'm losing the data thing, but then you're like trying to ask me a million questions. So here's a study from the CDC showing how the decline in SARS-CoV-2 antibodies after mild infection among frontline healthcare personnel and how it wanes much more quickly than the vaccine. So I know you
post it. I'll look at it. So we have from the largest studies.
So I know you have your cute little like preprint Israeli thing that also talks about hybrid immunity, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, okay? Here's how the Delta variant works, okay? First, we have COVID-19. It kills off the older population. Then the new variant comes out. And it turns out that in order for this virus to survive, it makes a lot more sense to not be quite as deadly, however, to spread to a younger generation. This is why, although we're not seeing so many kids right now getting COVID and dying from COVID, we are seeing rates of children with COVID upticking. So it only makes sense that we would nip this in the bud, that after the FDA has tested the long-term effects of this vaccine, tested the efficacy, and gone through all the necessary clinical trials, that we, also make sure kids are vaccinated against COVID-19 among the countless other vaccines that we already mandate that Rob himself, keep in mind, has already said he's just fine with.
Okay, so you sent me an article from the CDC from August of 2020, and you claim that this article says that natural immunity wanes faster than the COVID vaccine, correct?
No, I said that it showed that it waned in about 60. What did it say?
Oh, so then again, your claim. So example, again, then this is so you're making a claim that no one's disputing. Yes, natural immunity can eventually wane. The question is, does it wane faster than the vaccine?
You made the claim that it waned faster.
No, I didn't. I made the claim that the vaccine wanes faster. That's my entire claim.
Sorry, you said natural immunity wanes faster. This shows that they lost their COVID-19 antibodies by 60 days.
Anyways, so he hasn't responded to that claim. He hasn't. Secondly, I provided evidence that specifically talked about how vaccinated these people with natural immunity actually causes more adverse medical conditions than...
I'm sorry. Did you not read the same article that I just sent?
Yes, the article is healthcare...
let him finish, Hunter.
Tell me if I'm right. I don't want a 50-minute explanation. Is this the article? Decline in SARS-CoV-2 antibodies after mild infection among frontline healthcare. Is that the article?
Yep.
Okay, that show me where that says that it actually declines, natural immunity declines faster than the COVID vaccine.
94% experienced a decline at repeat testing approximately 60 days later, and 28%. Let's see. Yeah. The 3,248 participants had detectable antibodies at baseline upon repeat
COVID
testing
vaccine. Get to where it says COVID vaccine. You're just going to read the whole article? It doesn't say COVID vaccine. Was there a COVID vaccine in August 2020?
Holy shit. Andrew, are you
you do have to let him. You do have to let him.
No. I'm not asking you. No. Andrew, I'm asking you. Do you understand why I'm bringing this up? Because he was making the claim that natural immunity lasts longer than the vaccine. And what I'm saying is that...
I understand, but I can't step in.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you understand, because Rob Noerr's just...
No, we can give you lifelines, Hunter. It's all on you. This is you. Neo versus Smith. You got to save the world right now. Go for it.
So natural immunity, according to this report that I'm reading right now, explains that it wanes. 94% of experience decline of antibodies at repeat testing approximately 60 days later. It is right there at the very fucking top of the CDC article.
Okay, real quick, and I know that you want to just expound on and on. Let me ask you real quick. Do you acknowledge that the vaccine also wanes?
Yes, but in a much longer amount of time.
That's garbage.
Around like 6 to 8 months.
The evidence, even the Israeli study. Again, you have yet to provide a study that suggests that. This study is not comparative. You're just saying, please, you're literally pulling the source. Please, let me finish. So this is what he does. I said, I didn't argue that the studies didn't say that natural immunity wanes. I said that it lasts longer, although it does wane, it lasts longer than the vaccine. He then cites a study from before the vaccines were created saying, see, natural immunity wanes. Yes, no one argued against that. It's the impetus is on you to provide the evidence of your claim.
This has no relevance on the vaccine.
Please, which you can't do. Now, I would like to read another.
You got to let him respond too.
Right. So I'll read another piece of evidence. This is straight from the CDC. The CDC's own vSafe data shows, and I'll post the link to this. 0.5% need medical. Please be quiet. 0.5 need medical care after the first shot, and 0.7 after the second. 12,000 kids per million. 3,000 of those, 0.1% after the first shot, and 0.2 after the second, need emergency or hospital care. This means that for every million kids vaccinated, 91,000 are unable to do normal daily activities after the first shot, and 254,000 after the second. That means there's 345,000 kids homesick to avoid 8,000 COVID infections. 7,800 of those infections are too mild to require hospitalization. This is from the CDC's own data from June 24th.
Okay, cool. Hunter, you can take as much time as you need to respond or give it. I don't really want to get
off on that big tangent because I'm not too interested in that. Like we were just talking about the CDC thing, and then he tried to say, well, it was before the vaccine. It doesn't matter, Rob. The reason you keep trying to skirt away from this specific topic and this specific point is because it destroys what you were saying. You were making the claim that the vaccine wanes faster than natural immunity. We don't need to compare it to the vaccine to see. Look up when the vaccine generally starts to wane. It's around like 5 to 8 months, anywhere in that general ballpark. And then you can look here. The natural antibodies wane within 60 days. This was 94% of those experienced a decline in their antibodies. You don't need to I'm not even sure what you're asking for at this point. Like your claim is that natural immunity lasts longer, and this debunks that.
It does not. If you look at the comparative study, first off, the way you're reading this study is inaccurate. It talks about how 94% experienced some sort of decline in natural immunity, but only 28% in that were below the threshold for immunity that they would consider no longer effectively immunized. That means that even though it's 94, that experienced some sort of
faster though, right?
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Provide me natural immunity wanes even more.
I hate to do this because what happens is I say provide me something and then you just ramble on for 5 minutes when I'm just asking a simple question.
No,
provide me the link that shows. Provide me the link that shows.
What happens is
hang on, both of you. Chill out for just a second. Both you guys take a breath. You're in the last 10-minute stretch here, okay? Hunter, he's asking if you can provide some specific data for him. Take a second.
The main problem seems to be that I keep doing that, and then you read it or just don't read it, and then seem to make something up. So it says, quote, I'll read this since I don't know if Rob's able to.
Here we go. I asked to provide something, he goes off for 5 minutes again.
Because I've already provided this for you. Rob, do you want to open it up again? Did you forget that I sent this to you?
Which link is it that provides that says that that the vaccine is longer efficacy than natural immunity? Just tell me that link.
Oh, so you want one that actually specific? Okay, so here's what. Okay,
right. You provided one link in this chat that I see.
Because it's obviously
from the CDC. It's not comparative.
Like
it's not. But listen, please, just give me a second to explain this, right? Because I do want to get on to one other
you're
point.
Asking a bunch of questions.
You're saying I provide. You're provided a link that said natural immunity wanes. I could provide other links, like from the Israeli study. I have another link right here that is definitive. It says result. The vaccines had a 13.06-fold, 95% CIA increased risk for breakthrough infections in the Delta. This increased risk was significant. Conclusion, the study determined that natural immunity confers longer lasting and stronger protection against infection, symptomatic disease, and hospitalization caused by Delta compared to the vaccine. I have yet, all you've provided was one link. The people in my chat could see it in the chat. That was from the CDC that says natural immunity wanes. It was before the vaccine was even created. So how can you say, aha, therefore natural immunity wanes, and that proves that it wanes faster than the vaccine when you have not provided any evidence of how long it takes for the vaccine to wane?
Okay, I got you. I'm understanding now what the specific thing is you want. So I'm just going to look it up for you. I'll find out exactly when the COVID vaccine.
Okay, and while he's doing that, and we're going to give him time to do that, Rob. That's fair. There's two things that I have. One, Ethan Ralph had made a request that I asked Hunter Avallone if he would be willing to go on the kill stream.
I would love to. Please let me on the kill stream with those fucks.
Yeah, he's so that's a yes, Ethan Ralph. He's willing to go on the kill stream.
So
and
let's
then
see.
two, Rob, do you want to go on the kill stream?
I don't. As long as it's one on. I hate the panels. If it's 1-on-1, 2-on-2.
No, it's a one-on-one.
Yeah,
But
I don't
while
know
he's
what it
looking
is.
that up, I figured that was a good time. Oh,
It's
Ethan,
an experience.
So,
Prepare
yeah,
yourself.
prepare yourself. It's a hell of a thing. So
Okay.
Hunter Avallone agreed. He's going to take on Vince James on the kill stream. That's
Well, hold on. I didn't know it was. I don't know. It depends on what the subject is, but yeah.
Gotcha. But anyway, I'm going to turn it back over to the debaters, guys. We've got 5 minutes before we hit.
Okay, I have a very important.
Right.
I have a very important.
Hang on,
whoa,
we're going to get to
whoa,
it, Rob.
on my turn here.
We're going to get to everything. I promise.
Yeah,
So we've
because
got
you
5
asked me
minutes.
for
Hang on.
something that I'm not sure. Again,
hang on. As we wind it down, right? Everyone in the super chats know this, that we always give a portion of the super chats to both debaters. It's been so far a hell of a debate. Okay, hell of a debate. We're going to turn the floor back over to Hunter. Go ahead, Hunter.
Sure. So Rob asked me for a specific article on this that I've now put it on the chat. And it shows right here that as a result, vaccines that initially offered, say, 90% of protection against mild cases of disease might only be 70% effective after 6 or 7 months. So again, things wane, vaccines wane. We have to get boosters for other vaccines. This is just a normal thing. So we have 6 to 7 months where you still, even then, have arguably anywhere between like 70% at the high end. Some studies have shown really lower efficacy, even like maybe as low as like 32%. But again, 30 to 70%, pretty wide number there, but still better than nothing. So you have this after 6 or 7 months, or you have natural immunity, which wanes after like 60 days to 90 days, it seems. So obviously the vaccine seems to be the better choice.
That's not what your study said. First off, I'm providing comparative studies that are large, including the Israeli study that was 2 million people. You provided one study that was like 200 something people, and it doesn't even say what you say it says. It says that there started to be waning 60 days in. It did not say that waning meant that it was only 70% effective.
That's not what I said.
Right. But now you're saying, this shows that after 6 months of the vaccine, it's only 70% effective. But it doesn't show what the wane was at 60 days. It doesn't show. So it could have very well waned 20% at 60 days. This study isn't comparative. So again, I'm providing the only comparative studies. Now, the question that I have is this.
Because it's not comparative, it's wrong.
Please. I've gone through it. So the last question I have
just
for this,
saying the dumbest shit I've ever heard. But seriously,
I don't think you're faring so well on this debate. The last question I have is this: it seems that you're saying that even those with natural immunity, even if it only ups their uptick to protection, or children, it only ups it a lot. We should do it because we should basically do everything possible within reason to stop the spread of COVID. Is that correct?
I mean, within what's legal, what right? I mean, yeah, it's a pretty nuanced conversation there about like the proper measures.
Let me ask you this: are you in favor of the Biden mandate that says that if you choose not to get vaccinated, even if you have natural immunity, you have to get tested every week?
So wait, are we moving away from the natural immunity conversation then?
No, this is specifically on the natural immunity. I'm just asking. We keep going back and forth on the data. The data's there. People could see it. I think that I provided the better data. So the question I have for you is, are you in favor of the Biden portion of the mandate that says that even those with natural immunity have to get tested every week by their employer
I'm not going to answer that because I don't think we've adequately addressed the natural immunity thing yet. Because basically what you're saying is, well, I have a comparative study, so therefore I'm right. I don't know what that has to do with anything. We have one study showing the vaccine loses efficacy within 6 to 7 months, and we have CDC data showing that antibodies begin to wane as early as 60 days. It is very obvious. No. Rob, shut up. It's very obvious that the vaccine lasts significantly longer and gives you much greater protection against this virus. I don't know why you're so hung up on the natural immunity thing.
Again, real quick to address.
Let him finish, Rob. Let him finish.
By the way, Rob, on top of trampling on the Constitution, now your solution is pretty much just everyone get COVID to develop natural immunity?
That's not what my solution was. So again, I've looked at your study. I talked about the potential problems with your study. I talked about how you're misinterpreted. I provided studies that had a far better group of people, 1 million people as opposed to 248. I provided comparative studies. You have one study. And again, I want to, so we, if the rest of the, I understand you want to run out the clock because you don't want to answer this question, but we've gone back and forth in the study. So the final question that I have is, do you think that those, or do you support the idea that even those with natural immunity should have to get tested by their employer once a week?
Oh, yeah, sure, because we know that it wanes faster.
Okay, just because it wanes faster. Are you vaccinated?
One of the reasons. Yeah.
Should you get tested every week?
No, I'm vaccinated. But
why?
If it's 6 or
7, so let's say hypothetically,
if it's 6 or 7 months later, then yeah, absolutely.
So let's say hypothetically, that you would be, if the data ends up going the other way, and the data shows that those with natural immunity actually have stronger and longer lasting immunity than you, would you then acknowledge if they have to be tested, you have to?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, if natural immunity was so much better and they were able to provide proof that they had natural immunity, then yeah, they might. I don't think that they should necessarily have to undergo testing. If
no, that wasn't the question. Should you undergo testing? Should you be forced to undergo testing?
Why should I? I just said that I'm vaccinated.
I said if the data shows that natural immunity is superior to the vaccinated immunity, should that mean that you have, as a vaccinated person, have to get tested once a week?
No.
Why are you unwilling to do everything possible to stop the spread of COVID?
I'm done with your questions, Rob.
I'm sure you are, Hunter. I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are done.
So for the audience watching, what Rob is trying to do, again, is trying to paint me into some kind of like optical bad corner by saying, why are you unwilling to not get tested every week if, hypothetically speaking, the fucking vaccine loses efficacy faster than the natural immunity? Okay, go ahead, Rob. Just like you've been doing this entire debate, keep on making up stories, keep on telling us scary, creepy pastas about how spooky the long-term effects are going to be, whatever. I think that you want to move past this because you realize you've gotten blown the fuck out on this COVID vaccine immunity point. Specifically, you're trying to claim that the natural immunity was better and lasts longer, and it does not. There is nowhere that is actually substantiated and indicated solidly when we are able to see that the fucking vaccine lasts far longer. And by the way, I'll let you know this. One other thing I didn't get to mention earlier, there was a good Yale study that came out. I'd be happy to send it to you if you'd like, that found that the vaccine so far has already prevented upwards to 280,000 deaths. So if we want to talk a lot about like the vaccine and, the scary adverse side effects where people feel sick for one day, COVID would be a hell of a lot worse. And honestly, this vaccine has been demonstrated to do what it is supposed to do.
Okay,
that's
so
going to be my closing statement, I guess.
What I'll say,
I'm not going to. Rob, you can go ahead and end to the audience. I'm going to go pee, and then
sure. I would leave too if I was you. No big deal.
Yeah, I'm running so scared, Rob. I'm terrified. Right.
So, anyways, I've actually provided you data. Please shut your mouth. You're not doing so well. I understand the need to interrupt. Daddy. You said that was your final statement. Go pee, do what you got to do. I provided actual better studies that showed what he's doing is he's saying, I trust my one study that used 248 people that wasn't comparative so much that I'm willing to say that those with natural immunity should have to get tested. But if any of those litany of studies that Rob provided were true, that natural immunity actually is longer lasting and superior than the vaccination, well, then I still don't feel that I should have to get tested. I don't feel. What he's doing is making a personal judgment based on the studies he's seen on which ones are true and which ones aren't. I've gone through why his studies are actually worse, the one study he provided that wasn't even comparative, than the litany of studies that I provided. In addition, but he's still going to choose to ignore all the studies say, no, those aren't proof of anything, and base his decisions based on that. That's exactly what he accuses anti-vaxxers of doing, cherry-picking data to justify their own positions. That's exactly what Hunter's doing. He's not saying, well, yeah, maybe these studies you're citing are valid. Maybe they are. Maybe I should look into them, and maybe I should get tested every week because they are valid. He's not saying that. He sets an arbitrary distinction that says what I've done is moral and enough, and other people, even though there are credible studies that are more supported, and even though Dr. Fauci himself has admitted on TV, he doesn't have an answer to natural immunity and why it's superior. Even though he's admitted that, that's what he's saying. I've also provided you evidence going through the Israeli study and the UK study that shows those with natural immunity to prevent one asymptomatic case, which is a case with no symptoms, To prevent one, we would have 77 serious adverse effects if we vaccinated those with natural immunity. I then used the CDC's own numbers, their own numbers, to show that for every million kids we vaccinated, you would have almost 350,000 that would have serious adverse effects enough that they would have to miss school. And that would only stop 8,000 COVID infections, 7,800 of which are asymptomatic. So this isn't looking at potential mutations in the future. This is the CDC's number, which I provided the link to them, the CDC's number that's showing that right now vaccinating kids actually harms more kids than it would be able to save. Something he admitted that if we proved that the vaccine would harm more kids than it helped, would we still force them to get it because it would protect the spread to adults? He said no, he wouldn't force that. He has no answer to this. He doesn't understand comparative analysis, right? He's just going through the very fundamental level of vaccine good, therefore everyone should have to have it. But that's not the case. And this is how you prove that it's about control, which was the first part of the debate, because they're not actually looking at the science. They choose and cherry pick when to decide. For example, we saw that we didn't even get to this, but we could see that other countries that we're told have better healthcare systems like Sweden, Finland, etc., they've stopped allowing the vaccines to go to children because of severe cases of inflammation of the heart. We've seen that every other industrialized country refused to support lockdowns for schools. The head of the CDC, Robert Redfield, said that the lockdowns were harming kids and killing more kids than COVID. We even had Joe Biden's head of the CDC say, yes, the science shows that we shouldn't have lockdowns. And then once the teachers union stepped in, all of a sudden they changed.
He's back now, Rob. Okay. Hunter, are you there, Hunter?
He don't want to come back.
Okay, Hunter. I think we can give you some time to respond. Rob just read us the riot act pretty much. So
are we ready to get to the Q&A?
Yeah. No. Well, first we're going to do closing statements. You can close first, Hunter, and then Rob open. He'll close second, and then we have a ton of questions for you guys. We sure appreciate you sticking around. Go ahead, Hunter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just asking, are we getting on to the Q&A?
Oh, I said we're going to do closing statements, and then we have a ton of questions. So,
yeah, shit.
You're going to do you can close first, and then we'll move over to Rob.
Oh, I thought that was Rob's closing statement. Okay, I already kind of thought I made my closing statement. The last thing I said about the immunity thing was kind of I thought that was Rob's closing statement there. My bad.
Okay. Well, Rob, if you want to close, you can close.
Right. So the initial position that I had is, and I stand by that position, I'm not saying that I'm an anti-vaxxer that thinks that the vaccine's being created to kill people. I'm not saying anything like that. I think for certain people in certain positions that it makes sense to get the vaccine. Though I don't recommend or advocate anything because I'm not a medical professional, and it's up to people to consult with their own medical professionals. But we can see this is about control. They're constantly censoring people that have questions or pointing to counter studies and things like that. We didn't get into it, but we see the demonization of other forms of treatment, such as monoclonal treatments, by all of these experts and media personalities when it turns out that the data suggests monoclonal treatments are incredibly effective. And we see how they basically are cheering against that. They don't want some other form that's not as able to control people like a monoclonal treatment after you're infected. They don't want that, right? And so you could see that it was one of the lockdowns, the mandates, and the stimulus was one of the largest transfers of health from the poor and middle class. And we can see how these mandates...
Stop. Hunter... Did you mute your audio when you got up to go pee?
No, Rob was going on his whole tangent of my stream. I muted it for like 1 second when my stream went to the be right back screen.
Okay, good. Okay, I was gonna cry foul for a second. Go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
No problem. And so
people wanted their headache to be over. I'm sorry.
So you did.
Go ahead. No, I said people wanted the headache to be over. That's why, I muted for a second.
We'll check. I guess we'll check afterwards, but that's fine. Anyways, we could see that actually that this was about control for the reasons I said, and they're not using data. In this debate specifically, you could see Hunter is so confident in one study that he provided that wasn't comparative, that was before the actual vaccine was even created. When I provide a litany of studies that show that the actual natural immunity is superior, despite that, he doesn't care. He keeps saying, well, I don't really care about that. But when you're forcing medical decisions on people and forcing them to take medications, when the data shows when we go through the studies that you're actually causing more adverse effects than you're solving, because these people with these forms of immunity already are heavily protected against COVID, including those with natural immunity, those that are are incredibly young and healthy, and children specifically. Again, he doesn't contest that children are more protected in every way from the COVID than vaccinated adults. And I actually read you numbers from the CDC showing to stop 8,000 cases of COVID, only 200 of which would be serious, we would cause 350,000 relevant medical events that were so serious it would force children to not be in school. He doesn't care. He skips all of that. And he cherry picks the data that he wants, the very thing he accused anti-vaxxers of doing. So he says, I trust this one study that I'm citing so much that shows that the vaccine is superior to natural immunity, even in the face of studies that analyze millions of people, in the face of a litany of studies that show that the opposite is true. He's unwilling. He just says, there's no proof of that. There's no proof of that. And he's willing to force the government to enact medical decisions on you that he's unwilling to accept himself. So we know, for example, that if it's about taking reasonable measures to stop the spread of COVID, that's why even those with natural immunity that have a 99.76 immunity should be forced to get the vaccination so that it's 99.84 which is the data that I provided. They should still have to get tested if they're not vaccinated, but Hunter doesn't have to be. And this is what you see from these control freaks all the time. They're always willing to say that other people, that they're doing enough, what they've done's enough, they shouldn't be burdened more. They'll say, just get the vaccine, it's a no-brainer, just do it. But they're not willing to do something simple like get tested every week that they recommend that those that have superior protection to them don't do. Lastly, you can see throughout the entirety of this debate that there is no interaction when it comes to the specifics of this. And it's ironic because the left and the people that cheer on the vaccine, they talk about how they're the party of science and things like that. Yet I'm analyzing the data far more significantly and talking about how this doesn't make sense in certain groups of people. And you can see that it's even more difficult from my position because so much of our mainstream is censoring evidence that would be able to more strongly predict this. We have reason not to trust these people. They've lied to us over and over. They've said that Black Lives Matter was okay to go out and protest, but you couldn't go to your job. I went through all of that at the beginning. It's all about control. It's all about hypocrisy. This Fauci and members of the CDC have lied over and over. And last thing, I didn't get to mention this. We actually had two people, top officials at the FDA, resign and then say that they don't recommend the booster. And the reason they resigned was they felt that the Biden administration was pressuring them to approve the boosters. So the idea that we just trust everything the FDA says, remember, it was all the left telling us this vaccine can't happen. We wouldn't trust it anyway, says Biden, Kamala Harris, because Trump will put pressure on the FDA and we wouldn't trust it if it's a Trump vaccine. All of that happening, and we're told by people like Hunter, just shut up. You're an anti-vaxxer if you bring up these relevant studies and stuff. And apparently, he hasn't spoke up about the censorship and things like that have occurred to people like us. So I think I won this debate easily, but I had a lot of fun doing it.
Well, Hunter,
Am I able to do I'll do a closing.
I do know that you, I was going to say, I do know that you negated the closing, but I want to give you the opportunity. If you want to go ahead and close, you still can.
I got to make a closing for that. Yeah. So basically this entire time, what we've heard from Rob is a scare story. It's a story designed to scare everybody and make them feel afraid. And it's funny because actually it's instilling fear. And that is a way that oftentimes people can gain control. So when Rob is telling you that this is tyranny, not true. The precedent exists there. The government is able to do this. Private businesses are able to mandate this, and states are able to mandate lockdowns and vaccines. The government rights and the precedent exists there. So not tyranny if it's going via legal avenues, which is what OSHA is and what the state rights are as well. As far as the actual efficacy rate of this vaccine, here's some science numbers for you, buddy, from sciencenews.org. Shows the massive gap between hospitalizations of adults by vaccination status from January to July. Over in July, by the way, unvaccinated account for way higher percentage. I'd be happy to put this in the chat as well. So this is some numbers for you right here. They make 431. I don't know if these are percentages, but it's a very nice graph that you can like click around on and look at the rates. And you can see my stream.
Yeah, if you want to pop that in, I'll get it down.
Yeah, my stream is seeing this right now, just how the rates of hospitalizations among the unvaccinated are skyrocketing. So again, if you have some problems with the experts, if you don't like Joe Biden, if you don't trust Fauci, we would have to talk about whether or not those reasons were valid. But at the end of the day, you don't have to trust them in order to look at this very real world data that we have that shows the vaccine is safe and effective. Not only this, but we also have the PubMed meta-analysis indicating that the vaccine is generally safe and effective and didn't even lead to that many adverse effects. So overall, this vaccine seems to be effective. We have an international consensus at this point that these vaccines are safe, beneficial, and effective at preventing COVID. So, and lastly, I wanted to address again the natural immunity thing. Rob, for some reason, seems to think that if he just keeps on boasting that he has a better understanding of the numbers, that can somehow mean he's right. Meanwhile, he claimed that natural immunity lasts longer than the vaccine, even though we now know that the vaccine wanes within 6 to 7 months, and the natural immunity begins to wane within 60 days. Obviously, natural immunity wanes significantly faster, makes way more sense to get the vaccine. But either way, I really appreciated this debate. I appreciated the conversation. It did make me a little bit sad to see Rob kind of trampling on the Constitution and spitting in the face of the Founding Fathers. Also, it makes me a little bit scared that Rob seems to be okay with like children getting sick with COVID or anything. He tried to back me into a lot of optical corners, so perhaps maybe I'm able to do that also, considering the fact that, the vaccines over the past several years have saved over 97 million individuals. The CDC estimates that vaccinations will prevent more than 21 million hospitalizations and over 700,000 deaths for children. These are vaccines in general. So I don't know. I just think for me, I want to see less kids spreading the virus. I want to see less people dying, and I want to see this pandemic go away. I want to see our economy open back up, and we're going to do that by getting vaccinated, a safe and effective vaccine.
So
Thanks again, Andrew.
Yeah, sure. As we move into the Q&A, I did want to address something in the chat. I understand a lot of people think that Hunter forfeited his closing statement. I took it as, I always think everybody who comes in here is very good faith. So I took it as Hunter didn't realize Rob wasn't already making his closing statement, and that was that. So I'll take the hit for that one, guys. Moving on to the Q&A, as you know, after we do things a little bit differently on the Crucible, and after the closing arguments are done, moderators can participate. We often have our own questions. We have a ton of backlog questions, so I'm only going to ask one. Pedro, do you have any?
You're right. We should just keep it to the logged ones, but I would ask Hunter if he wanted to talk about his Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, but that's not one I always have to shoot across the bow. So. But we got to keep it.
My Lord and Savior is named peer-reviewed studies. Thank you.
Oh, gotcha.
Just kidding.
False idols.
So there was some fact checking that we did as we're going. We do that often here. The fact check on the casinos in Nevada was correct. Okay. To be fair, Hunter conceded that there was that was correct. So I wanted to.
And can I also just add really quick that I can recognize that there are some discrepancies there, and some of these mandates, the way that they're being carried out in some ways might be unfair, but again, I can recognize that while also generally recognizing the safety and efficacy of the vaccine.
Actually, I was just going to say that one of the things Hunter said was that he had a recognition for that. So I'm kind of glad that you, and then also on the smallpox for Washington, that's also 100% factual. He did mandate that all of his soldiers get vaccinated. So that was something I didn't know. I had to look that up in real time, and I'm real good with history. So one thing that Rob said that I did want to get to real quick, he touched on something that I thought was interesting, which is church services and mental health, which I would consider churches to be a primary, considering how Christian the nation is, for mental health. The lockdown certainly had a negative effect on that. Would you say so, Rob?
The lockdown had locking down churches certainly had a negative effect on people's mental health from churches. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. And then Hunter, I wanted to ask you about that too.
Yeah, I think that, of course, it's when you cut people off from any opportunity to be in their community, so obviously people's mental health is going to suffer being in lockdown. That, of course, is it's an unfortunate reality of being in a lockdown. No one likes it. No one thinks it's great. But yeah, I would definitely say that if you're cut out from your social community, that can absolutely have a negative impact on our mental health. That's why, hopefully, thankfully, more people are getting vaccinated. The closer we are to achieving herd immunity, the less likely it is that, anything like this would have to happen again. So.
Gotcha. That's just kind of what I had. I had a ton written down, but we have so many audience questions. Pedro, if you can pull some of those up, I'd appreciate it.
Gotcha. All right. And this first one is from Hasbar2988. He donated $10. Thank you for that. We appreciate that, sir. And he's asking Rob, where's your cool hat, Rob? Your American hat. Where is it? What happened?
So here's the
You know,
problem.
just go get it, Rob. I don't even want to hear it. Just get it.
It's at work, and the reason I can't wear it while I'm streaming is because it won't go. The cowboy hat, I can't put these headphones over top of it, so it's at work right now.
Gotcha.
Next up, Pedro.
All right. And we have from NW16613, and he wants to say, "Hey Avallone, your position regarding people's rights to not get infected treats all people as if they already are all infected. How can you justify such an unethical position?"
So it's not unethical. Although this is not a direct comparison, I think that a good comparison is drunk driving. So, for example, you give up your bodily autonomy to put alcohol in your body. You also give up some of your property rights, considering the fact that you're in your own car at the will of the state. And the reason we do that is because it protects other people. This doesn't assume that everyone's all infected. What this means is that when people are unvaccinated, they're far more likely to be infected. So if we wait, I'm rereading your position regarding people's rights to not get infected treats all people as so in order for like a society to freely function, right, we need to have what's called negative liberties as well, which means that it's the same reason why like you have a right to not get murdered. It's because if every time I walk out my door, I'm getting stabbed, or if every time I walk out my door, I'm getting sneezed on and getting infected with a preventable disease, then I can't actually live my life freely. My freedom is jeopardized by other people and living their quote unquote freedom. So there is a line there. Usually when it's in the interest of public health, that's where the precedent kind of comes in. So it doesn't treat anyone like they're all infected, rather it just recognizes that the unvaxxed pose a greater risk of spreading it. And so that like other people have a right not to get sick as well. So yeah.
Rob, you can engage with that as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a terrible analogy, right? And the justification that he's given would mean, like, in my lifetime, I'm 37. I remember, everyone remembers swine flu and MRSA and West Nile and all this stuff?
The perfect age.
Yeah, I'm sure you agree. So his justification would literally be, we could force people to do anything in the name of keeping us all safe anytime that there's an illness out there that could affect other people. So he would say, oh, swine flu's coming. We could shut down the economy. We could force people to take this medication or that. It's absurd. The DUI analogy is completely ridiculous because it has nothing to do, like DUI says that you can't take a proactive measure that will actively endanger people. That's different than telling people they must take a prophylactic measure that has a very limited chance.
Not completely
that has a very limited chance of actually harming people. This is the problem that the pro-vaccine people have. They talk about how awesome the vaccine is and how it provides such great protection to you, but it's weak enough that they need to force things upon you or else they'll be in some form of danger. The only person that cited any data on this was me, citing what Joe Biden said in his speech, that you only have a 1 in 1,600,000 chance of being hospitalized with COVID if you're fully vaccinated. So it's a completely different.
Yeah, you can respond, Hunter.
Just to be clear, what Biden said was like a weird quote. It's not actually data. We've looked at the data on this stream here from sciencenews.com. We saw the meta-analysis showing the efficacy rate. We found the...
What's the efficacy rate? Just remind the audience.
Wait. Hold on. Whoa. Stop. I'm not going down your line all of a sudden of questioning. I'm sending you the meta-analysis right here that I already cited. So we looked at the meta-analysis, and when we're talking about like, well, why are the vaccinated really still, how do they have a risk if you're vaccinated, if it works? That's a good question, and I can understand how it might seem intuitively incorrect. However, if you are unvaccinated, there's a couple risks there. One, you are more likely to get COVID, and with that means you're more likely to get the Delta variant. We already know that since the Delta variants come along and we have the vaccine built against the Alpha variant, the Delta variant is more infectious, and you're much more likely, not actually, I don't want to say much more likely, but you are more likely to suffer a breakthrough infection. So when someone's not vaccinated, they basically raise the risk still of people who are vaccinated, one, getting sick, and two, they make it so that the Delta variant is able to continue to proliferate and spread when, again, herd immunity is so important because it ultimately tries to prevent that. So there are absolutely risks that are posed. And lastly, I would even tell you to look at the ICU beds. Like a lot of the hospitalizations right now are of people that might be suffering with COVID or unvaxxed, and they're taking up the ICU beds. And this is sometimes hurting other people as well. So there are many different reasons why the vaccinated can still be harmed by the unvaxxed.
When it comes to
Phineas, you can respond. You can respond. But before you guys respond, or before you respond, Rob, please shout out your channel. Tell everyone where they can find you.
Sure. My channel is Normal America with Rob Noerr on YouTube, and I'm just Rob Noerr, all lowercase, one word, on Twitch TV. So ROBNOERR on Twitch TV.
That's and you too, Hunter. Where can everybody find you?
Yeah, just find me on Twitch at Hunter Avallone.
Okay, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, actually, what again? We didn't get to
I'll
talk about this
have
much,
the
but
last
I'll say this real quick. When it comes to herd immunity and things like that, one, it's irrelevant if you as a person are protected because you've chosen to get the vaccine. So the herd immunity would be irrelevant. Second, herd immunity doesn't just take into account the vaccinated; it also takes into account those with natural immunity. We could see from the CDC's own numbers that they last month said that they grossly underestimated the amount of people that had COVID, and actually it was 50% higher than they actually thought. So there were double the cases that they actually thought. This brought the infective fatality rate well below 1%, and it's minuscule if you're not in the range of over age 65. So the idea that this is the same as someone drinking and driving that has a far more ability to have fatality rate is nonsense. And we could see, according to the CDC, they're already saying that our herd immunity is already above 80% when you factor in those that are vaccinated and those that have natural immunity. That's straight from the CDC. So you can see how they keep moving the mark, and we can see how places that have reached that over 90% factor, such as Israel, that has between natural immunity and antibodies and the vaccination are above 90%. And yet the Delta variant affected them even worse than it did the United States.
Sure. So the Delta variant actually happened because the vaccine waned over time. But I didn't. I know I said I was going to let him get the last thing, but
yeah,
no, it is actually.
He can.
I just want to say one more.
Corrected at Hunter, so he can get the last word on it.
The last thing I'll say is in Israel, you're right. There was a bigger outbreak of the Delta variant. Why don't you look at the hospitalization rates? Hospitalization rates and deaths way lower. Singapore, they had vaccinated and then they had an outbreak of Delta variant. That the hospitalization rates, the death rates way lower. Every time the vaccine is demonstrated to do its job. Now that's the last thing I'm going to say until we get to the next question. Plus, I feel bad because it's actually unironically getting kind of late on my end for the
well, we're going to just kind of plow through them as fast as we can.
Just
Hunter.
real quick, it'll take me 15 seconds. I have a study here that
Rob,
shows
we
that
got to move on. We got to move on to the next one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we got to kill this. All right, Roland Stott. If the vaccine mandate by OSHA is for workplace safety, why is it only for 100 employees plus?
Hunter.
And then what are their stance on religious or conscious objections? So are they giving them violates Nuremberg Code? So, okay, first of all, the reason it's 100 plus employees, I'm not actually entirely sure. My guess would be because bigger companies are more likely, if you're more likely to have 100 employees, you're probably also able to afford to carry this out. That would be my guess. Personally, I'm glad that it goes to 100 plus employers because I don't want to see small businesses getting super fucked over, considering they've already been fucked over by both lockdowns and the fact that just with the virus, less people are shopping. So that would be my best off the top of my head guess there, I guess. But when it comes to the stance on religious objections or whatnot, there are obviously pathways to take in order to pursue objections. There are ways to pursue, you can look at COVID requests for exemptions have significantly risen with the mandates. So there is absolutely a process. That's also, just keep in mind, part of the legal precedent there is that if you are going to have vaccination mandates, you also need to make sure there's a process for both exemptions and for people that are legitimately unable to get the vaccine. Maybe they have a health thing. For me personally, the religious thing, I don't buy that. There's not a lot of court precedent there for that either. And why would your religion mean that you're at a higher risk of dying? It's kind of weird. And then are they aware? Are they violating the Nuremberg Code? So no, the Nuremberg Code speaks specifically to how you're not allowed to do experimental operations on people. The Nuremberg or the vaccine is not experimental. It's gone through all the clinical trials. It does not apply there at all. But that's all I'm going to say on this. If Rob wants to say something, I'm not going to respond to that.
No, we're going to keep moving. We've got questions for both. So go ahead, Pedro.
Gotcha. All right. Question for Hunter again. How can you say there is an international consensus on vaccinated children when Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, and other countries banned mRNA for young people?
So they paused that because of the myocarditis thing. That doesn't actually mean that the vaccine isn't safe and effective. It absolutely is. When I say the international consensus, I'm talking about studies that have been done in the UK, studies that have been done in England, studies that have been done in Canada, showing all over the world that this vaccine is overall safe and effective. I'm aware that Sweden put a little pause on that, and honestly, that's fine. That's within their right to do that. But again, the myocarditis thing, very rare to occur, and if it does, in most cases, it like goes away completely on its own. And keep in mind that you can also have like heart inflammation and other problems from getting COVID too. So it's kind of like you've got to kind of evaluate both those risks there.
And if I could just say real quick to respond to, even if it is a slight risk, the risk of COVID and having these things happen to children is also a slight risk. And I've actually gone through the data from the CDC showing that more children have significant adverse medical effects from the vaccine than are protected from COVID. I've used the CDC numbers to show that.
What qualities would a hypothetical vaccine need to have, if any, for Rob to agree that the government ought to try to mandate them?
The first thing that you have to have is a threshold argument that needs to be answered by the government for how many people could be adversely affected by the illness that's being talked about to force this infringement of rights in the first place. So even if you said, so for example, that's why you wouldn't do it for the common cold. Hunter's argument that he's saying is, well, if we could force vaccinations on people and that would help stop the spread of disease without embracing that threshold means that we would do that for any potential disease, which is obviously horrendous. So it would have to be a disease that these particular groups needed the vaccine to protect themselves from significantly. Clearly, that doesn't meet the mark when it comes to COVID. Instead, what we should be doing with COVID is protecting the most vulnerable people. Instead, what we did was the exact opposite, particularly Democrats, where they forced COVID patients into nursing homes, which thereby caused tens of thousands. And then they took the people that were actually the most protected against COVID, young, healthy people and children, and enforced all sorts of draconian measures on them.
You have to let Hunter respond to that, too. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was actually, this is a little side point, but can you send me the, hold on. I'm looking at your med page thing, and now I'm looking at this one. I'm trying to find where it showed that more kids are in the hospital with negative side effects than with COVID or something. Can I see that data, please,
Sure.
from the CDC? Yeah. If I could just have that sent, and then I don't need to respond to anything. Honestly, I've been streaming for 2 hours. I'm ready to wrap this up.
Yeah. We're
All right, next question for Hunter.
powering through.
Yep.
Go ahead, Pedro.
Has he ever tried to submit something to VAERS to see how difficult it is? And does he know you could be fined or imprisoned for submitting false data?
You could be fined, but again, it's like, how do you know it's false, right? Like you'd have to know that they knowingly falsified it. Whereas there's a good chance that a lot of these VAERS reports are people that are sincerely suffering from some kind of illness, or maybe they are dealing with a side effect. But all that the thing with VAERS is that there's no way to actually confirm whether any of those negative effects were like causational to the vaccine or not.
You can skip that question, Pedro.
Good go. All right. Picking the next one up. Oh, I can pass this one on to you, Hunter. Hunter, who is your greatest inspirational streamer?
Big Papa Fascist.
There you go. Correct answer, sir.
Best answer ever.
All right. And then our next one is from Blame the Pain. Can you ask Rob and Hunter if it's weird that the vaccines have become a mainstream talking point now? And follow up if they think flat Earth will become a mainstream point.
Flat Earth won't become mainstream. That's a stupid point. The idea of vaccine becoming a talking point is because we're seeing an unprecedented movement of trying to control people in hypocritical ways using the vaccine as an excuse. The entire point of the vaccine, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, is, as we've seen in history, to divide a population in two and blame one side of that population, in this scenario, the unvaccinated, for all the problems. You can see how it's being used because they lie to you about who the people are. For example, we're led to believe that it's just a bunch of Trump supporter, 10-toothed rednecks that aren't taking the vaccine. But if you look based on racial data, we can see the highest percentage of people that are distrusting of the vaccine or haven't had it are actually people of color, particularly black people and Hispanic people. That's not surprising given that people like Hunter, I don't want to say that, that's not fair. People on the left, though, and have said that our system is systemically racist and all the institutions are racist, including the medical and pharmaceutical industry. When you tell people that for a decade, they might start to believe you. And so then when you say, oh, and now we're going to force you to take this medication against your will, they may have credible reasons to not trust those very institutions that just last year that the Biden voters were all telling them was systemically racist.
Crucible, if this is all about the safety, then why are vaccines considered more important than negative COVID tests, Hunter?
Well, what do you mean? Like, vaccines prevent you from needing to undergo those tests to begin with. Also, really quickly, I'm just gonna have to scroll through this information, this preprint thing that or this PDF that Rob sent me. I'm looking through it now, but just really quickly, I did want to mention, you kept saying the CDC said this. It says right at the beginning, the findings and conclusions in this report are those of the authors and do not represent the official position of the CDC. So, I mean, it's possible that this has some interesting stuff. Like I said, I'm not saying that discredits the entire thing. I'm still looking through it all. It might be published by the CDC or in the CDC, but it is not that of the CDC. So just to be clear, that's all. That's what I wanted to mention.
It's from Dr. Tom Shaburkaro, who's a medical doctor who is on the vaccine safety team for the COVID-19.
But when it comes
CDC
right,
COVID-19
but when it comes to actually but when it comes to actually like getting tests and COVID tests and whatnot, like, yeah, getting vaccinated prevents you from even needing to undergo the test to begin with, right? So I don't see why that would be
absurd.
An argument against
in fact,
getting
even the
vaccinated.
own data that you provided shows that the vaccine wanes, and we know that the vaccine's not perfect. So why would people not?
Why are you bringing about the? You can't wait. Why are you bringing up the waning efficacy rate when we know that natural immunity wanes faster?
We don't. That's a lie that you're spreading based on one study. You've ignored all the studies that I
based on a CDC report. I'm sorry, I thought you were just able to cite
it's not
CDC.
Based. Let me repeat what's done. He cited a CDC report that existed before the vaccine that said that natural immunity starts to wane in 6 months, but it only is a small amount of waning.
60 days.
Or 60 days. I'm sorry. But it's only a small amount of waning, not a waning that would make only in 28% after 60 days would it be a waning that we would think would be problematic.
Yeah, 90 days, though, it's even more.
And then he cited non-CDC numbers that said that the vaccine wanes at a 70% level at 6 months. It doesn't show how much it wanes at 60 days, and that's not a CDC study. He does not have a comparative study with the CDC that shows this, and his study only cited 248 people that it analyzed, whereas the Israel study and the other study that I provided cited millions of people that had natural immunity versus the
bringing
vaccine.
up the Israel study that also brought up the hybrid immunity and the importance there. So
again,
sure. You seem to really wait, Rob. You really seem interested in wanting your no. You seem really interested in wanting your cake and having it too, because it's really convenient for you to cite the CDC at one point, then I bring up the CDC, and you're like, well, it's not a comparative study, so therefore it doesn't matter. First of all, the thing that I sent you was a quick summary that explains how, on the data that we have, it shows that the efficacy wanes after anywhere between 6 to 7 months. And then we have a CDC thing showing that antibodies wane within 60 days. You don't need a big, long comparative study and everything, this, that, and the other thing in order to logically conclude that obviously natural immunity wanes quicker.
So you're saying the Israel study was wrong. The millions of people that they analyzed, that was just flat out wrong.
Did I say that was wrong? I said the Israel
study. How could it be right if you're saying that
the
conclusion it reaches is the opposite of the truth?
What was the conclusion again?
The conclusion they reached was that, citing millions of people that had the vaccine and natural immunity, that natural immunity was superior in short term and lasted longer than the vaccine.
I didn't know it said long term. I guess I'd have to look at it a little bit longer.
And you've cited a study that looked at 248 people in August of 2020.
And you're citing to me an Israeli preprint. This is something that hasn't been peer reviewed. This is something that hasn't actually been put up to the test. This is literally called a fucking preprint. I put a link to 30-something
studies.
So it's really funny again.
30-something studies that I put.
And then he sends me a preprint.
What you can see is, I mean, I went through the exact study of what his study said. I showed how it wasn't comparative. I've talked about how the numbers don't say what he's trying to say.
It doesn't have to be comparative. It doesn't matter.
I've talked about that, and he's just totally ignoring it. He's picking and choosing the data he wants, even though the bulk of the data shows.
Dude, you're bringing a wait. Rob is telling me that I'm picking and choosing data, and yet he is citing an Israeli preprint to support his claim that natural immunity is better, even though the CDC contradicts that. Are you fucking kidding me, Rob?
Where's the CDC? Show me the evidence that the CDC contradicts it.
I already showed you that evidence. Let's get to the next question, because clearly
let's get to the next question, because
we're actually not going to push through any more of the questions. We just ran out of time. It was one hell of a debate. I sure appreciate both of you guys going on. Here's the two most important questions. One, did you both have fun?
I did.
I don't know. I'm having a headache after this one, but
I'm sure you would.
I can feel for you there, because honestly, Rob, I'm never gonna. I cannot debate you, sir. You are Machine Gun Kelly. You know how to.
Yeah, he just gish gallops and spews so many points.
I wouldn't say that.
Are you crying? Are you crying?
I totally agree with you, Hog.
Here, don't take it too.
I'm not crying at all. It's just frustrating because like it gives you a nice defense, because then you get to spew a shit ton of points and then ask me a question, and if I'm not able to answer the question right there, you're like, look, you're wrong, huh? Even though you just like spewed a bunch.
You did poorly in this debate. You whined and cried. You did poorly.
Oh yeah,
Rob,
I did so bad, Rob. Please,
Hunter,
please, Robbie boy.
The Crucible would like to extend its appreciation for you coming on tonight. We appreciate the spirited debate. we're going to let you go. We're going to keep Rob behind for just a few minutes. We have a few things we want to talk to him about that are not debate related. Thank you so much for
I'm
coming
not
on.
going to tune in to see you guys shit talking me, right?
I promise.
No, sir.
can just
no,
mute it.
sir. Or you could.
You know that
You-
my
you're the one
screen
who
was
said
muted
you
for like
had to go,
10
right?
seconds.
Wait,
Are you crying now? Are you?
No, we'll check the VOD. I'm not crying. I'm just saying.
It was
you
muted
said
for like 10 seconds. Yes.
to stop a
I clicked
headache.
the be right back.
That may have been, guys, that may have been my
Dude,
fault.
I
There was
clicked
somebody
the
in the
be
chat
right
who
back
said
button
that.
and muted it for like 10
That would
seconds.
have, if it
Are
was
you
like
crying,
he just
Rob?
got up and
I'm-
muted the
I'm
whole stream
smiling,
while he
Hunter.
left, I would have been upset. But if he didn't, I don't care if he. If
I
you
didn't.
know.
I clicked the be right back button. It was like 10 seconds. Then I unmuted and it was sitting back down.
Okay, fair
Chill,
enough.
Rob.
I'm just
Don't cry,
telling you.
right? It's okay.
So this guy in chat said I must have only tuned in right then.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah, seriously. If
So-
he stayed along, he would have seen that it came right back on in a second. But
Right.
either way,
Can't do
I
that.
appreciate the convo. Rob, have fun in La La Land. Bye.
Take care, Hunter. So